Chapter 3862. Yiqing Luo naturally felt the fury in Huangfu Zhentian's eyes when he looked at her. She didn't really care. She had her own man as her backer. Even if Huangfu Zhentian was truly enraged, she wasn't worried that it would blow up. After all, her family's Xian's reputation was still resounding. Yes, that's right, she's a bully. Was she stupid? Why wouldn't he hug a thigh? Yiqing Luo's slender brows rose as she met Huangfu Zhentian's eyes without any fear as she smiled sweetly. He knows who was the one who stimulated his potential, and I believe you all have a way to verify it. As for the few of you from the Huangfu family, you came all the way to the Earth domain, and even old Master Huangfu came personally. This indeed shows your sincerity. However, how can old Master be sure that Pei Sheng really wants to go back with you? She paused for a moment, then sneered. You said that you want to bring Pei Sheng back to the Huangfu family. Does that mean that Pei Sheng has to give up everything that he has fought for in the land and go back with you? Why? Yiqing Luo's words were impolite and straightforward. Huangfu Zhentian's face darkened with a swoosh. Yiqing Luo gave a ridiculing laugh as she continued, just based on the fact that you think he's a collateral bloodline of the Huangfu family? Just because you think he activated the Huangfu bloodline? So he has to return to the Huangfu clan? Miss Yi. Huangfu Dongyu shouted sternly with a gloomy face, don't think that you can be so unscrupulous just because you have the support of His Majesty. This is the Huangfu family's old master after all. Be more polite with your words. He stood up, his eyes filled with anger. The way he looked at Yiqing Luo was as though he was looking at an enemy. When Yiqing Luo heard that, she couldn't help but let out a ha sound as her eyes were filled with ridicule. You should be glad that you're from the Huangfu family, otherwise I'll just rely on my Xian to back me up, not even bothering about you, do you understand? Yiqing Luo. Huangfu Fengyan was unable to restrain her anger as she totally didn't use her brain as she bellowed out Yiqing Luo's full name from her throat. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards as she gave an unattainable smile. That was how he pretended to be. If you have the guts, come and bite me. Ha! Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with disdain and ridicule, as though it was pricked by needles, pricking Huangfu Fengyan's eyes. Huangfu Fengyan was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Her demonic eyes, one gold and one ink, flashed with anger and jealousy. She bared her teeth and was just about to open her mouth to rebuke Yiqing Luo. However, it was forcefully suppressed by Huangfu Zhentian's domineering voice. Miss Yi, you seem to have a lot of opinions about our Huangfu clan? Snatching someone from me just because of a disagreement, why can't I have any opinions? Yiqing Luo chuckled as she retorted. Huangfu Zhentian placed his hands behind his back, and his aura had calmed down. However, the domineering dignity of a superior was still there. He didn't continue to tangle with Yiqing Luo, but turned his sight towards Pei Sheng. Lad, you're not willing to follow us back to Huangfu family? Pei Sheng looked at Huangfu Zhentian. The emotions in his eyes were cold and complicated. Hiding too many emotions. When he heard Huangfu Zhentian's question, Pei Sheng's fists suddenly clenched tightly as the veins on his forehead popped out. He was practically gritting his teeth as he squeezed out word by word from the slits of his teeth, I don't want. Chapter 3863. Pei Sheng, in the Earth realm, you'll forever be a nobody but. In the Huangfu family can give you the best resources and preferential treatment, allowing your ability to advance by leaps and bounds. Huangfu Zhentian's voice was steady and calm. As though he was tempting something. To ordinary people, this was indeed a temptation. In this era where the strong were revered and ability was supreme. To be able to obtain sufficient resources to advance by leaps and bounds. This was the target which all cultivators yearned for. No one was willing to be under others. But Huangfu Zhentian's temptation totally didn't make Pei Sheng's expression change. He was unmoved as he continued his unfinished words, I'm not willing. There wasn't even a hint of hesitation in his tone. Huangfu Zhentian's expression sunk instantly. Do you know what you're rejecting? I'm not interested. Pei Sheng's eyes sparkled with dark golden light as a hurricane surged. I'm doing very well in the Earth realm. Since you've never appeared for the past 19 years, then I don't need you in the future. His voice was tense as though he was suppressing something. That look of a trapped beast made one's heart palpitate. Yiqing Luo frowned as she was just about to open her mouth to pacify Pei Sheng's agitated emotions. The warm and soft little hand which was holding onto her suddenly withdrew from her palm. Gu Zishi had already jogged over and hugged Pei Sheng from behind. The lady's delicate fragrance and the warmth of her hands made the raging emotions in Pei Sheng's body gradually calm down. His tightly clenched fist slowly loosened as it covered the back of the lady's hand. His emotions had stabilized. The hurricane surging in his eyes had also stopped. He looked towards Huangfu Zhentian again. His emotions were extremely indifferent. Please return. Huangfu Zhentian's brows creased tightly. His eyes sparkled with shrewd glint as he sized up the two who were hugging each other. In his heart, he seemed to be thinking about something. When Huangfu Fengyan saw this, she silently guessed Huangfu Zhentian's thoughts as she spoke out. Pei Sheng, this is your only chance. What can you do in the Earth realm? Even if you feel that it's wrong for the Huangfu family to ignore you for so many years. But now, Grandpa has come to pick you up personally. What are you dissatisfied with? Every single word of his was mocking Pei Sheng for being insensible. He secretly mocked Pei Sheng for taking advantage of him. Without waiting for Pei Sheng to speak, Huangfu Fengyan continued, or are you saying that you can't bear to part with that woman? For a woman like her to confess her love to a man in public and throw herself into his embrace without any sense of propriety, justice, and honor, such a woman isn't worthy of our Huangfu clan. Pei Sheng didn't even bat an eyelid at Huangfu Fengyan's previous sentence. However, when Huangfu Fengyan spoke her next sentence, Huang Yu's eyes widened. Pei Sheng's gaze flickered with coldness as she swiftly shot towards Huangfu Fengyan. Compared to a barbaric, rude, arrogant, despotic, and malicious woman like you, Zishi is 1,000 times better than you. You. Huangfu Fengyan's face twisted. He actually dared to compare that kind of woman with her? He even dared to humiliate her? Third Miss Huangfu's words are really laughable. Yiqing Luo scoffed lightly as she spoke out in ridicule. My Zishi is merely bravely expressing her feelings, pouring out her love to the man whom she likes and also likes her. What's wrong with that? Chapter 38-64. This sentence made Huangfu Fengyan so angry that her face turned red, and her eyes turned black. Her face was ferocious, and her demonic eyes flickered with resentment. Just as she was about to fight back in exasperation, Huangfu Zhentian's steady voice interrupted Huangfu Fengyan's words. Pei Sheng, don't you want to know about your mother? Pei Sheng suddenly raised his head and stared fixedly at Huangfu Zhentian. Huangfu Zhentian raised his white brows, looked at Pei Sheng again, and repeated, come back to the Huangfu clan with me, and I will tell you everything about your mother. Also, why you're in the Earth domain, and the reason why we haven't looked for you for many years, I can tell you everything. Then, his gaze faintly glanced at Gu Zishi. Also, if you really like that woman, I agree to let you bring her back to the Huangfu clan. Pei Sheng pursed his lips tightly, and his face was dark, but he didn't speak. But his pair of ink-like eyes revealed the emotions in the depths of his heart. Pei Sheng, in this world, only the people of our Huangfu clan are your family. Could it be that you're really willing to part ways with us when you know you still have a family member alive? Huangfu Zhentian seemed to understand Pei Sheng's weakness. He began to use kinship to persuade Pei Sheng. Every single word was like a sharp blade stabbing into Pei Sheng's heart. His muscles tightened even more. On his handsome face, the veins on his forehead seemed as if they were about to burst out. The hand that pressed on the back of Gu Zishi's hand also unconsciously increased the strength. The woman's fair and delicate little hand was pinched until it turned red. But Gu Zishi didn't struggle, and let him pinch her hand. Her other hand gently wrapped around his waist, and her voice was gentle and full of firmness. Pei Sheng, no matter where you go, I will follow you, so, don't worry about me, just follow what you think in your heart. It had to be said that these 9 years of getting along made them the people who understood each other the best. Gu Zishi knew the deepest thoughts in Pei Sheng's heart. Indeed, Huangfu Zhentian used kinship correctly. He used Pei Sheng's mother to make Pei Sheng unable to resist. But because of this, Pei Sheng's disgust towards Huangfu Zhentian grew even deeper. The hatred in his heart grew even more intense. Because, old Master Huangfu. The girl's cold voice was filled with mockery. Gu Zishi immediately raised her head to look at Yiqing Luo. A pair of beautiful eyes flickered slightly. There were many things that she could not say on behalf of Pei Sheng. Because Huangfu Zhentian was Pei Sheng's senior. She wanted to be with Pei Sheng. There were many things that had to be considered. But Yiqing Luo was different. Yiqing Luo had the overlord and had no other relations with the Huangfu family. Many words Yiqing Luo could say. As expected, at the next instance, he heard Yiqing Luo continuing, Huangfu family's people have always loved to use this kind of method to threaten this junior. Yiqing Luo's expression was solemn and cold. There wasn't even a hint of a smile on his face. His eyes were filled with mockery and disdain. This was after the appearance of Huangfu Zhentian. This was the first time Yiqing Luo's emotions had fluctuated so much. Yiqing Luo's interruption made Huangfu Zhentian frowned. A pair of astute eyes looked at Yiqing Luo unhappily. Chapter 3865. Shut up. When Yiqing Luo finished her words, Huangfu Fengyan subconsciously stopped her with a stern shout. She pounced towards Yiqing Luo in a frenzy. Huangfu Dongyu and Huangfu Qifei glanced at each other, and a trace of panic simultaneously appeared on their faces. Miss Yi, grandfather only wants his grandson to return back to his original identity, why do you have to be so overbearing? Huangfu Qifei's gentle brows flashed a treacherous cold glint. Huangfu Dongyu's face sunk as his expression turned gloomy and dangerous. Miss Yi, although the overlord is around and you can be unbridled, but before you speak or do anything, please consider the overlord. His words hinted at Dmo Xian to hear. He didn't want Dmo Xian to ruin his reputation because of a lady. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a voice suddenly rang out. He heard Yiqing Luo's ridiculing laughter rang. He looked towards the young lady. He saw the young lady leaping upwards as her figure agilely avoided Huangfu Fengyan's attack. Following that, like a butterfly, she pounced into the tall man's arms. Her dress fluttered as a brilliant red glow swept past. The young lady nestled in the man's arms as her brows rose and her smile was like a flower. Her long and narrow eyes seemed to have a blossoming rose at the corner of her eyes. She was devastatingly beautiful to the extreme. She was laughing. Her laughter was filled with ridicule and her gaze was filled with a thick sense of ridicule. Huangfu Dongyu's expression turned gloomier. His hands which were hanging by his sides were tightly clenched into fists. He suppressed his anger and was about to open his mouth. But he was interrupted by a miserable shriek. Ah! At the same time that sharp miserable shriek was heard. Something was flying towards him from the front. Huangfu Dongyu evaded and was about to avoid it. But old Master Huangfu's sleeve suddenly moved as a gust of wind surged over. That thing which was crashing over reduced its speed and crashed onto Huangfu Dongyu. Huangfu Dongyu then saw it clearly. The thing which crashed onto him, wasn't it his fourth sister Huangfu Fengyan? What a disgrace! Huangfu Zhentian brushed his sleeves as he stared at the both of them with a gloomy expression. Huangfu Dongyu and Huangfu Fengyan supported each other and stood up. Then, she heard the man's deep, dark, and slightly cold voice ring out, "Since you know this sovereign is here, you should respect this sovereign's woman a little more. His tone was clearly calm and indifferent, yet it made one's heart tremble. For no reason, one could hear the thick warning in his voice. For the sake of old Master Huangfu, I'll spare your life. If you dare to touch Lil Luo again, I'll make sure you won't be able to return. Huangfu Fengyan's face was pale with fright, and her delicate body could not help but tremble. Huangfu Dongyu immediately steadied her. Immediately after, he felt a cold gaze that was as sharp as an ice blade fall on his body. His heart skipped a beat. He suddenly raised his head. His eyes met with a pair of peach blossom eyes that were as cold as the frost of December. As for what young Master Huangfu said, you don't have to worry about it. Lil Luo doesn't need to consider for this sovereign at all. Whatever she wants to do, this sovereign will accompany her to do it. This sovereign loves to see her doing whatever she wants to do, saying whatever she wants to say. He enunciated each word in a clear voice. Everyone in the main hall heard it exceptionally clearly. These words, actually he could totally not need to say it. Yiqing Luo knew it too. But, he still said it. Because, he intentionally wanted the entire world to know how much he pampered her. Chapter 3866. Dmo Xian's words were like a tight slap on Huangfu Dongyu's face. Most importantly, Huangfu Dongyu could only endure the feeling of being slapped in the face and didn't dare to have any other emotions. After such a disturbance, a trace of relief flashed on Huangfu Qifei's refined face. He cleared his throat and said gently, "You're right, Di Zun. Big Brother and Feng Yan were indeed too reckless. However, Big Brother is right. Grandfather only wants his family to be by his side. I'm sure Miss Yi wouldn't want Pei Sheng to be separated from his family, right?" Huangfu Qifei asked in an amiable tone. But the contents of the words were all criticizing Yiqing Luo for being overbearing and not sensible. Yiqing Luo laughed when she heard that. His eyes were filled with mockery and a mocking, cold glint, which was flowing quickly. She ignored Huangfu Qifei's words. She just laughed sarcastically. His gaze was deep and mocking as he looked at them. That gaze that seemed to see through everything caused Huangfu Qifei's heart to be unable to help but tighten. It was as if she had already seen through their plan. A trace of imperceptible coldness flashed past Huangfu Qifei's handsome and warm face. He weighed his words in his mind. Just as he was about to open his mouth and change the topic, Huangfu Zhentian lifted his feet and walked towards Yiqing Luo's direction. The old man's movements. He had also successfully stopped Huangfu Qifei from speaking. The three people from the Huangfu clan looked at Huangfu Zhentian almost at the same time. Even Huangfu Dongyu and Huangfu Fengyan didn't have the anger of being wronged on their faces. On the contrary, he seemed slightly flustered. Seeing that Huangfu Zhentian didn't have any hesitation in his footsteps, Yiqing Tang's eyes lit up. Huangfu Qifei clenched his fists and immediately chased after him, thinking of an excuse to stop the old man. However, before he could speak, Huangfu Zhentian turned his gaze over. Huangfu Qifei's entire body froze on the spot. He stopped chasing after the old man. He stood stiffly on the spot and lowered his head. Huangfu Fengyan and Huangfu Dongyu anxiously stomped their feet and rushed over. They bumped into Huangfu Qifei and hinted something with their eyes. Huangfu Qifei didn't even raise his head. Huangfu Zhentian stopped when he was just 3 steps away from Yiqing Luo. Although he was old. However, his domineering and majesty did not diminish, but instead increased. He fixed his gaze on Yiqing Luo. Looking at Yiqing Luo's smirk of ridicule. The muscles on his old face twitched, and a solemn look flashed across his eyes. "Miss Yi, it is indeed our Huangfu family's fault for coming to the Earth domain rashly and trying to take Pei Sheng away without explaining everything clearly." He paused for a moment before his voice gradually deepened. "As for the 3 people from the Huangfu family, it was the Huangfu family's fault for not disciplining them properly and causing them to make a fool of themselves. If Miss Yi is displeased, I apologize to Miss Yi on their behalf. This wave of reversal made Yiqing Luo dumbfounded. He could no longer maintain the sneer on his face. She furrowed her brows and looked at the old man in front of her, who had always been sitting at the top of the pyramid. For some reason, he felt that he was very dispirited at this moment. Yiqing Luo had just recovered from her daze. Then, Huangfu Zhentian's actions shocked her to the point that she took 2 steps back. Both her hands grabbed hold of Dmo Xian's arm. She saw Huangfu Zhentian standing in front of Yiqing Luo, as he shed away his unattainable high position and slowly lowered his noble head towards Yiqing Luo. Chapter 3867. Grandfather. Grandfather. When Huangfu trio saw this, they couldn't help but cried out in shock. They couldn't believe that their own grandfather would actually lower his head to a young lady. Cough. That. She was used to Huangfu Zhentian's overbearing and dignified look. Suddenly seeing Huangfu Zhentian make such a move. Yiqing Luo was not only dazed, she was extremely shocked. Old Master Huangfu, what are you doing? Huangfu Zhentian didn't raise his head as his voice carried a slight tremble. Miss Yi, the Xiao Jin you mentioned. What's your relationship with him? Xiao Jin. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased as she instantly understood. She was ridiculing Huangfu Zhentian for making use of Pei Sheng's mother's matter to threaten Pei Sheng. She also mentioned Xiao Jin. So, Huangfu Zhentian suddenly made such a move was because of Xiao Jin? She narrowed her eyes slightly. His gaze swept towards the 3 members of the Huangfu clan behind Huangfu Zhentian who had panicked expressions, and he suddenly understood something. She felt that. Earlier Huangfu Fengyan suddenly made a move on her and Huangfu Dongyu's accusation was somewhat strange. They knew that the overlord was around. One made a move and the other spoke rudely. Did they not want their lives anymore? Apparently, they were intentionally creating a disturbance. At that time, she was still thinking what these 3 were planning and trying to hide. After hearing Huangfu Zhentian's question, she finally understood. Those 3. They were intentionally trying to make Old Master Huangfu ignore the name, Xiao Jin. From Old Master Huangfu's actions and tone. Old Master Huangfu's feelings towards Xiao Jin were very deep and very real. But Xiao Jin seemed to have a huge hatred towards the Huangfu family. There was a high possibility that it was related to the trio from Huangfu family. As for Old Master Huangfu, he totally didn't know about it. Otherwise, those 3 wouldn't have such an expression. Before I answer your question, will Old Master Huangfu please answer my question first? Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Huangfu Zhentian. Huangfu Zhentian raised his head as something seemed to be surging in his eyes. Yiqing Luo asked, Xiao Jin and you, what's your relationship? He's my grandson. Huangfu Zhentian's voice trembled slightly as the emotions on his face were complicated. He is my most promising grandson, but... He paused, lowered his head, and did not continue speaking. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips. Xiao Jin is my brother. Brother? Huangfu Zhentian suddenly raised his head with an excited expression. Then, is he also in the land? Where is he? Can I see him? Not a trace of falsehood could be discerned from Huangfu Zhentian's eyes. Yiqing Luo shook her head. He's not here. I know some things regarding him. Under Huangfu Zhentian's hopeful gaze, she continued, Jin Z doesn't have a good relationship with the Huangfu clan, right? It's not that he's unwilling to return to the Huangfu clan, but there's no place for him in the Huangfu clan. So, Old Master Huangfu, I don't really understand why you're so agitated after hearing Jin Zi's name. Why can't the Huangfu clan accept him? Huangfu Zhentian's eyes opened wide with excitement. He's the successor of the Huangfu clan. How could the Huangfu clan possibly not tolerate him? It's him. He wasn't willing to stay in the Huangfu clan because of his mother. All these, did you hear it from him personally, or someone else told you? Yiqing Luo pointed out something. Huangfu Zhentian's pupils contracted as his entire body tensed up, trembling slightly. Chapter 3868. Shut up. Huangfu Zhentian glanced coldly at Huangfu Fengyan, and his voice was low and cold. Don't think that I don't know what exactly the three of you are planning. I'll settle the score with you later. At any rate, Huangfu Zhentian was once the patriarch of the Huangfu clan. After his son inherited the position of the patriarch, he was able to maintain his prestige outside. It was sufficient to prove that Huangfu Zhentian wasn't an idiot. Yiqing Luo could tell the three of them's little tricks. He naturally sensed it as well. Looks like, Xiao Jin's matter was also related to the three of them. When he thought up to here, Huangfu Zhentian's eyes sank slightly. Old man Huangfu. Yiqing Luo didn't want to get involved in their family matters. Moreover, this was obviously not the time to discuss family matters. The surrounding profounders from the various powers were watching a good show. Her words drew Huangfu Zhentian's attention to her. Jin Zi's matter involves too many people, and it also involves the internal relationships of your Huangfu clan. It's not appropriate for me to make any comments, and it's not appropriate for me to discuss too much with you. She looked at Pei Sheng and continued, however, the Huangfu family still has to give Pei Sheng an explanation, and you should respect his wishes, not yours. Perhaps it was because of her relationship with Xiao Jin. Huangfu Zhentian actually didn't refute a single word. He looked at Pei Sheng, and there was an apologetic look in his deep and bright eyes. You're right. I should respect his wishes. I shouldn't be like this. Back then, Xiao Jin, that child, was because, the words were on the tip of his tongue, but he stopped himself. Then, it turned into a heavy sigh. Pei Sheng, I'll give you some time to consider. Do you want to leave with us or stay in the Earth domain? I'll respect your choice. 3 days later, I'll come to the Qiao residence again to hear your answer. After Huangfu Zhentian finished speaking, his body trembled as he turned around and walked towards the entrance of the main hall. He turned around. His silhouette looked extremely lonely and dispirited. The three Huangfu siblings looked at Huangfu Zhentian's back view and looked at Yiqing Luo. He wanted to say something. But when he thought of what Huangfu Zhentian had said just now, he felt a chill run down his spine. They opened their mouths and closed them again. In the end, he only called out, "Grandpa," in a low voice and hurriedly followed up. When he reached the door of the main hall, Huangfu Zhentian suddenly stopped moving. He just turned his body sideways. The direction of his eyes was looking towards Yiqing Luo's direction. "Miss Yi, I'm really sorry. If it's possible, I would like to see him." After that, Huangfu Zhentian closed his eyes tightly. He closed his eyes. It made the wrinkles on his face even more obvious. He didn't wait for Yiqing Luo to reply. In the blink of an eye, the few figures standing at the entrance of the main hall had already disappeared into thin air. Their speed was so fast that no one could clearly see how they left. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The surrounding people were so shocked that they cried out in surprise. After the incident with Huangfu Zhentian, Yiqing Luo and the rest didn't have the mood to eat anymore. Various powerhouses' cultivators were full of gossip and thoughts, but in front of Yiqing Luo and the others, they didn't dare to discuss about it. When Yiqing Luo and the rest left, no one stopped him. After returning to their courtyard, Yiqing Luo took a look at Pei Sheng, who had been following behind her with a grave expression as his brows were tightly knitted. Chapter 3869. Pei Sheng stood in front of Yiqing Luo as he lowered his head. Hearing Yiqing Luo's question, his back suddenly stiffened as he raised his head and looked at Yiqing Luo. The expression on his face turned into one of panic and helplessness. I don't know. Him at this moment. He had completely dropped the explosive imposing manner when he was facing Huang Fuzhentian in the main hall. His entire person seemed to have lost his target as he couldn't find his own direction. Even that flickering dark golden light in his eyes seemed to have lost its luster. Yiqing Luo looked at his look as she felt a little helpless. A person's character depended on that person's living environment. Like Pei Sheng, after his father died, he was ridiculed by the citizens. All he could hear were those unbearable words and discussions. He had low self-esteem. Since young, he had low self-esteem. Other than the matters regarding the Treasures Exchange Hall, he wasn't able to make a decisive decision. He would ponder over it. He would consider everything. What's more, he wasn't able to make a decision. Facing many matters, he subconsciously wanted to escape. It could be said that for so many years, if Gu Zishi wasn't by his side. Not to mention the fact that he could keep the Treasures Exchange Hall till now. Perhaps he himself wouldn't be able to survive. So when she heard Pei Sheng's lost tone, Yiqing Luo wasn't surprised at all. She stared straight at Pei Sheng as her gaze was calm. This concerns your future, so you must think clearly. No one can give you the answer that you want the most. Her words paused slightly as her vision looked towards the lady beside Pei Sheng as she added another sentence, Zishi can't give you an answer either. Pei Sheng opened his mouth wanting to say something, but when his mouth opened, his mind went blank. He pursed his lips tightly as his face turned green. Gu Zishi, who was beside him, held his hand tightly as her fingers squeezed hard. Pei Sheng looked at her. She smiled as her brows arched as she looked at him. As though she was consoling him. Zishi. Pei Sheng lowered his eyelids as he opened his mouth bitterly. His face was filled with a lost and helpless expression. His eyes also became dim and lifeless. His voice was filled with helplessness. He looked exactly like a puppy. However, Pei Sheng didn't even realize it. He had already changed the way he addressed Gu Zishi. She was no longer his little sister. Gu Zishi was obviously in a good mood. The feelings that he had been secretly in love with for so many years had finally received a response. He had finally walked out of the darkness and into the light. He could finally look at Pei Sheng openly and say, I like you. These actions required a great deal of courage. She finally did it. She finally got the answer she wanted. Furthermore, she understood Pei Sheng. Although Pei Sheng's entire body was filled with hostility when facing Huang Fuzhentian, Pei Sheng didn't dare to underestimate him. But, she knew. He knew that Pei Sheng was happy in the depths of her heart. Because in this world, at least there were still his relatives who were related to him by blood. Even if he was angry at the Huangfu clan for not caring about his mother and him for so many years, in the end, his heart was still happy. Otherwise, with Pei Sheng's disposition, he would definitely be extremely resolute and refuse Huang Fuzhentian. Chapter 3870. Pei Sheng's body stiffened. He wanted to retract his hand, which was intertwined with the lady's fingers. But it was held tightly by the lady. Pei Sheng lowered his head and looked at his wide palm, that fair and soft skin. His heart suddenly started to race. From this angle, Gu Zishi could totally see his reddened ears. The smile in Gu Zishi's eyes deepened as she held his hand and placed it in front of her chest. A pair of beautiful eyes, moist and filled with tenderness, looked at him with a smile as she continued to speak word by word, you will never be alone. Pei Sheng's pupils shrank abruptly. That big palm which was held tightly by the lady. Subconsciously, he held the lady's hand. He gripped it tightly. In his eyes, the dark golden glow, once again regained its original brilliance. Zishi. Pei Sheng's heart, suddenly seemed to be filled with some kind of energy. It was no longer that empty and pale feeling, totally not knowing what he was thinking about. Ah Luo. When Pei Sheng looked at Yiqing Luo again, the expression on his face was no longer in a daze. Even the tone which he spoke had become more solemn. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as she looked at him. Pei Sheng continued, Huangfu. Old master's words, do you think, can be trusted? In the end, he still couldn't call out the term, grandfather. Yiqing Luo replied very quickly, what aspect are you asking about? That is. He wants to bring me, and that friend of yours called Xiao Jin, back to Huangfu family, is that true? After Pei Sheng asked this question, he hurriedly added another sentence, I know, this choice, must be made by myself. I just want, to confirm. If you're asking about this aspect, I think, it's true. Yiqing Luo placed one hand on the stone table, as her slender fingers, slightly curled up, caressing the table. Following the movement of her fingertips, the expression on her face became even more indifferent. Generally speaking, large aristocratic families will indeed not allow their own bloodline to wander outside. After all, this kind of matter involves many unknown factors. For example, other aristocratic families know that their bloodline has wandered outside. Making use of this point to create trouble will cause some unnecessary trouble. For example, if people from other aristocratic families knew about it, it would greatly affect the reputation of the family. For example, if a member of the bloodline who has wandered outside marries someone else and gives birth to a child, then the bloodline they leave behind will spread further and further. If something were to happen, it could easily affect the entire clan. Yiqing Luo consecutively gave a few examples. Seeing that Pei Sheng's expression had turned extremely ugly, she softened her tone, of course, we can't rule out the possibility that old Master Huangfu is worried about the bloodline of the Huangfu family and doesn't want to see the bloodline of the Huangfu family suffering outside. After all, you're someone who has awakened the Huangfu clan's bloodline. Your eyes are very eye-catching. If the enemies of the Huangfu clan know of your existence, it's very likely that they'll come looking for you. Therefore, the summary above indicates that Grandpa Huangfu's desire to take you back to the Huangfu family is absolutely real. Yiqing Luo's words didn't make Pei Sheng's expression turn better, instead it made Pei Sheng's expression turn even uglier. Yiqing Luo could tell, but she didn't intentionally bring it up. It was as if she did not see his expression. He waited for a while. Chapter 3871. For example. To give you resources to allow you to advance by leaps and bounds. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Such words, even without Yiqing Luo's reminder. Pei Sheng could guess it himself. This was just a gimmick from the Huangfu clan. Pei Sheng didn't know much about the Huangfu clan. However, he also knew that the Huangfu family was one of the 4 great families in the Heaven Realm. This kind of aristocratic family was full of capable people. His descendants were all at the top of the clan. He was from a branch family and had never received any training since he was young. It was only now that he had awakened the Huangfu bloodline. Apart from the fact that half of his blood belonged to the Huangfu family, he had no feelings for them whatsoever. How could the Huangfu family really waste their so-called resources on an outsider like him? That's right, outsiders. To the Huangfu family. He, Pei Sheng, was an outsider. Pei Sheng's eyes flickered, and he asked again, then, is there something between that friend of yours and the Huangfu family? Why is he unwilling to return to the Huangfu clan? She looked at Huangfu Zhentian's expression and attitude when he mentioned Xiao Jin. Pei Sheng could see it too. Huangfu Zhentian was very concerned about that person called Xiao Jin. He noticed that the man's name had been mentioned. In Huangfu Zhentian's eyes, he didn't exist at all. They are more complicated than you. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers tapped lightly on the table as she said, he's not returning to Huangfu family, not because he's unwilling, but someone doesn't want him to go back. Or rather, on the surface, she wanted him to return. But, once he really went back. Those who resisted would think of all sorts of ways to decapitate him. Without hesitation, Pei Sheng blurted out, "You mean, the 3 young masters and daughters of the Huangfu clan?" Not just that. It was absolutely impossible for those 3 to suppress Qiao Jin in the Huangfu clan. After all, Qiao Jin was the only successor of the Huangfu clan. If there wasn't a mastermind behind all of this, it would be impossible. So, the things behind this were very complicated. Once things got complicated, it would be even more difficult to deal with. Qiao Jin's matter is totally different from yours, so there's no value for reference. Yiqing Luo raised her head, as her eyes looked at Pei Sheng calmly. Suddenly, her fingers that were tapping on the table paused. The voice suddenly stopped. This inexplicably caused a certain amount of pressure in Pei Sheng's heart. His entire body tensed up as his eyes stared unblinkingly at Yiqing Luo's hand which was placed on the table. However, regardless of whether you want to follow old Master Huangfu to the Huangfu clan, you must be careful of those 3 people. If you're harmed, old Master Huangfu might not uphold justice for you. Yiqing Luo's voice was suppressed to a very low and deep voice. This kind of voice caused Pei Sheng's emotions to tighten. His heart thumped uncontrollably. Yiqing Luo's face was cold and her calm emotions had not dissipated. She slowly stood up. Even though he was sitting down, his aura was already 2.8 meters tall. This time he stood up. His aura was fully unleashed. It caused Pei Sheng to freeze on the spot, not daring to move. Pei Sheng, I'll still say the same thing. This is your own life, no one can help you make the decision. Yiqing Luo's voice was calm and steady, every word was enunciated clearly. There's no need for you to lower yourself in front of me, and no need to worry that you'll make the wrong choice, disappoint me etc. To put it bluntly, I'm not anyone to you, we're just friends, just partners. The 2nd anniversary, you ask and I answer, long review activity had ended. There were a total of 4 Mo Jiabao who took part. Gujiu, Mo Jiabao Gujiu, happy 2nd anniversary of dethroning the 7 emperors, Mo Xian, Mo Jiabao Mo Xian, happy 2nd anniversary of dethroning the 7 emperors, familiar face baby, Mo Jiabao familiar face baby, time is not old, Mo pavilion will not disperse, Ruo Qin, Mo Jiabao Ruo Qin, having met you, regretted not having met earlier, time is not old, Mo pavilion will not disperse. There were a total of 4 babies and very few people took part. Moreover, the long reviews written by the 4 babies made me very touched. Made me have the guts. To have so many Mo Jiabao who love me, in this lifetime, I will never regret entering this profession. The 4 babies above can add my private account, the book review is pinned to the top of the comments, please take the initiative to add me, 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 please take the initiative to add me. Then provide me with the character design of your choice, I can choose 2 character designs, and the address. The deadline is August 10th before midnight. I'll go and customize the peripheral pillows on the 11th and send them over to you. Chapter 3872. Partner, do you understand? Yiqing Luo looked into his eyes as she asked word by word. Pei Sheng's pupils shrunk slightly. Yiqing Luo continued, a partner doesn't ask for any benefits, just staying by your side and supporting any decision you make. Everything you do, and what you want to do, is related to your own future, you don't need to look at my face. Perhaps it was because her aura was too strong? Or perhaps it was because her appearance had saved the treasure's exchange hall and changed his fate. So when Pei Sheng was in front of her, there was a feeling as though he was inferior to her. She was clearly very gentle, okay? Why did it seem as though she was a vicious person? When Pei Sheng heard that, he shuddered as he looked at Yiqing Luo in astonishment. Ah Sheng, you still have 3 days to consider. You can consider carefully and ask yourself clearly what you really want. Yiqing Luo softened her tone. Pei Sheng's character had already been set and she didn't think of changing his character. She only stood on a friend's point of view, helping him to analyze the situation clearly. Choosing kinship means giving up freedom, and also learning how to survive in a large family. Freedom of choice, then. After we part ways 3 days later, you might not be able to see anyone from the Huangfu family until you die. Pei Sheng slowly lowered his head. His brows were filled with struggling melancholy. Yiqing Luo took a look at Gu Zixi and exchanged glances with her. She held the man's arm as her lips curled slightly. "I'll give you some quiet space to think about it." She pulled Dmo Xian and the rest of the brothers as they left the courtyard, leaving the quiet to Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi. With Gu Zixi around, Yiqing Luo wasn't afraid that Pei Sheng would confine himself in a predicament. After all, Gu Zixi wasn't an ordinary person. After dismissing the bunch of brothers who joined in the fun, Yiqing Luo pulled Dmo Xian back to the room. Not waiting for Dmo Xian to open his mouth, she frowned in displeasure as she put on a straight face. "I asked you to rest properly but you didn't. After coaxing me to sleep, you sneaked out by yourself." Her little lips pouted as she stretched out her hand and grabbed Dmo Xian's collar, pulling the man in front of her. The man's handsome face was very close to her. His face was smooth and exquisite, and his long and narrow peach blossom eyes exuded a demonic charm. Yiqing Luo maintained her composure, determined not to be captivated by his beauty. "Speak. Did you sneak out to have an affair?" Dmo Xian's brows were filled with tenderness and pampering. His pupils were as deep as ink, like a deep pool, flickering with a few threads of dark light. Yiqing Luo was stared at by his blatant gaze. He felt his whole body heating up. Her cheeks were also unconsciously dyed crimson. "You. What are you laughing at? What are you looking at? Don't try to bluff your way through. You cheated on me, didn't you?" Yiqing Luo tried her best to make her voice sound more righteous and confident. After all, while she was asleep, the things he did to her, even though it was for her own good, were things that made his brothers ridicule him. Then, he sneaked off to a dangerous place. People who don't know how to rest. She had to scold him to wake him up. Queen Luo didn't notice at all. Her current mood was like a capricious wife facing her doting husband. Dmo Xian's smile became even more joyous. His entire face was like the blossoming of spring flowers, overflowing with elegance, making one unable to look away. Yiqing Luo's heart seemed to be agitated by thunder. For a moment, the feeling of losing her soul made her dizzy. Chapter 3873. After a moment of dizziness, she was carried up by the waist. The next moment, her back was plastered on the soft bedding. The man's warm breath blew on the skin beside her ear. "You want to know if I've cheated on you, right?" When the man said this, his voice was low and hoarse, and his tone was very light. So light that it couldn't be heard, like a feather, teasing her heart. Yiqing Luo's petite body trembled uncontrollably. Her little hand clutched the man's lapel tightly. Dmo Xian propped up both hands. That peerless handsome face was reflected in the young lady's pupils. The man's eyes were filled with a clear smile. That smile made her fall into a trance, as her heart and soul sank into his pampering. Unable to extricate herself. Unwilling to extricate herself. Looking at the person below him, her eyes were like silk, with a tender and sweet look. Dmo Xian's throat tightened. Even the color of his pupils had deepened by a lot. The corners of his lips were the same. There was an evil smile on his face. It made him look even more demonic and charming than before. He opened his mouth, his deep hoarse voice was as mellow as fine wine, making one intoxicated. "I have a way, to let you personally check whether I've cheated on you or not." His words fell. His kiss had already fallen. Warmth spread, gentle and affectionate. In the courtyard, Only Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were left. The two of them didn't speak to break the silence. Gu Zishi just hugged Pei Sheng, quietly accompanying him by his side. Not knowing how long had passed, Pei Sheng, who was standing stiffly on the ground, finally had a reaction. He moved. The lady beside him gently held his big palm, giving him warmth. Pei Sheng stood for a long time. His entire body was stiff. Not only his body was stiff, and his heart was stiff. After his palm was held, he stiffened his neck and turned his head, seeing the lady beside him. His voice was bitter and slightly hoarse. Zishi. I'm here. Gu Zishi gave him a gentle smile. Her pretty face also had a gentle smile. Only, Pei Sheng could see the tiredness between her brows, and the redness in her eyes. Pei Sheng's heart seemed to have been hit by something heavily. Subconsciously, he held Gu Zishi's small hand. There were vortexes swirling in his eyes. His emotions fluctuated greatly. Gu Zishi felt a little pain from his grip. She was slightly puzzled and called out softly, Sheng. Pei Sheng suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Gu Zishi's face crashed into his chest. Pei Sheng was not gentle at all. Moreover, his face hurt a little. However, this bit of pain was nothing to Gu Zishi. An immense sense of joy enveloped her body and mind. This was Pei Sheng's first time using such a method to hold her in his arms. The man buried his head in the hollow of her neck. When he opened his mouth, there was a spurt of air. Very hot, very scorching. This was the first time they were so close to each other. The man's hoarse and pained voice rang in her ears. Zishi, do you really not regret it? His voice was helpless and at a loss. Word by word, he spat them out. It was as if he had used up all his strength and courage. Gu Zishi buried herself in his arms and shook her head vigorously. Pei Sheng asked again, don't you regret your choice? Gu Zishi still shook her head. I'm a useless man. I'm not strong, I feel inferior, and I retreat easily. I don't even dare to choose my own life. I don't even have half of your courage. Chapter 3874. In the end, he tightened his arms a little. His voice became dignified and tense. Do you really not regret being like this? Pei Sheng had just finished his question. Suddenly, his neck was hooked by a soft arm. His head was slightly tilted forward. Then, his nose was filled with the fragrance of a woman. Something warm and soft covered his lips. It was a light touch. The woman had already moved back a little. Her gentle voice was like the most moving melody in the world, drifting into his ears. I don't regret it. From the first time we met, I decided that I will be with you in this life. So, no matter what kind of person you are, I will love you. She hooked her arms around his neck. Their foreheads touched each other's. Gu Zishi's pretty face was like a peach blossom. Moreover, I know what kind of person you are, better than you know yourself. What are you worried about? This sentence was definitely not an exaggeration. Who in the world understood him the best? Gu Zishi. Pei Sheng's face turned slightly red. He tightened his grip on Gu Zishi's arms. Gu Zishi's eyes lit up with a sweet smile when she saw that. She stroked his face with her little hand and said with a smile, don't be so unconfident. No matter what, you just have to remember that you still have me. That's enough. Zishi, Pei Sheng's eyes turned red. He suddenly pressed his big palm on Gu Zishi's head. A fierce kiss landed on her. His initiative had clearly expressed his feelings. Although both of them were in love for the first time. But in the depths of love, many things had already followed their instincts. His kiss landed. Gu Zishi leaned in his arms and panted softly. Sheng, let's go back to the treasure trading hall. We'll come back when you've made up your mind. Gu Zixi cheeks were red as she panted. Pei Sheng hummed in acknowledgement. Then, he hugged Gu Zixi's waist tightly in his arms. Gu Zixi was so shocked that she immediately reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. However, both of them were people who had been frozen in the same position for a long time. With this force, Pei Sheng's feet felt numb after not moving for a long time. Before he could take a step, he staggered and fell to the ground with Gu Zixi in his arms. "Ah!" Gu Zixi exclaimed. Fortunately, Pei Sheng reacted quickly enough. When he felt his body stiffen, he immediately lifted Gu Zixi's body. This fall, Gu Zixi basically fell into Pei Sheng's arms. After the two of them fell to the ground, they hurriedly sat up straight. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Both of them asked at the same time. He was still constantly checking if the other party was injured. When he heard the other party's question, both of them were taken aback. Then he saw that both of them had their hands on each other's body. Instantly, both of them laughed. In the dark, Zhou Mo, who was crouching on a tree and watching the show with Kitty Li in his arms, looked at the two people who were giggling foolishly. He clicked his tongue and shook his head. What a pair of idiots. I'm obviously very loving, okay? Kitty Li glared at him, then looked in the direction of Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi. That is pure love. Unlike you, who has seen countless people and flirted with countless people, how would you understand this kind of love? Hearing that, Zhou Mo's red phoenix eyes rose. His slender fingers moved, hooked Kitty Li's chin, and turned her to him. Little wild cat, where do you see that this young master has seen countless people? Kitty Li was forced to meet Zhou Mo's eyes. When Zhou Mo asked this question. Chapter 3875. The cat's keen senses made Kitty Li's black ears twitch. An invisible pressure came over. She shrunk her body and her tail started to stand up. As though he could predict Kitty Li's next move. Just as Kitty Li's petite figure was about to slip out of the man's embrace, Zhou Mo's palm flipped. Once again, he locked Kitty Li in his palm. Following that, he increased his strength as he pressed her into his embrace. His low and hoarse voice had a fox-like charm. Why aren't you replying? This kind of charm was on Zhou Mo. But it didn't seem out of place. On the contrary, it made Kitty Li's ears and tail stand up. Her little black tail coiled around Zhou Mo's wrist. The girl pretended to be fierce as her voice rang. What are you trying to do? Kitty Li isn't afraid of you. If you dare to lay a hand on Kitty Li, my sister loves me so much, she will definitely help me beat you up. Zhou Mo's thin lips curled as his smile became even more charming. But the corner of his eyes revealed a sense of danger. He bent down and leaned in close to her black ears. His thin lips moved. He gently blew a breath of air on it. Kitty Li's ears twitched as her body started to tremble. You, frivolous man, you. Tell me clearly, how did I read so many people? Zhou Mo held on to this topic, not willing to let go. Kitty Li's face flushed red. She was angry and also shy. Her little ears kept twitching. Her little body, which was curled up in Zhou Mo's embrace, softened by quite a bit. Zhou Mo's eyes deepened slightly. His gaze swept past the silly couple who were still giggling foolishly not too far away. He suddenly hooked his arm around Kitty Li's waist and with a leap, he brought Kitty Li and flew to another place. The wind blew mist beside her ear. The man's voice was extremely clear beside her ear at such a close distance. He said, "Little wild cat, the only woman who can move my heart is you alone. The only woman I am willing to be frivolous with, is only you." The blush on Kitty Li's face was completely unable to dissipate. The next day, there were still cultivators from various powerhouses who came to the Qiao residence as guests. On the surface, it was to visit Patriarch Qiao. But in actual fact, it was to meet Yiqing Luo or Dmo Xian. The losses that the Earth Kingdom had suffered in this battle. All the major forces had suffered heavy losses. For a long time in the future, the major forces would be repairing the medium sun. As for Yiqing Luo's group, even without Dmo Xian's relationship, they also wanted to make friends. If he could form a good relationship with Yiqing Luo, it would definitely be of great use to his future development. Not to mention, Yiqing Luo had Dmo Xian as her backing. There was also the Red Clear Pavilion and the Underworld Palace. Now even the Huangfu family, one of the Heaven Realm's 4 great heavenly clans, had to be courteous to Yiqing Luo. From yesterday's banquet, Yiqing Luo and Old Master Huangfu's conversation could be heard. It seemed like the person whom Old Master Huangfu was looking for, was Yiqing Luo's brother. The power behind this woman. It was so terrifying that it was suffocating. It could be said that the series of events that happened during the auction was the most important thing in the world. It had already made Yiqing Luo a legend in the large powerhouses' mouths. However, no matter how many profound practitioners from the major forces came, Yiqing Luo and the rest all used the excuse of recuperation to reject the visitation. Unless Patriarch Xiao personally invited him, Yiqing Luo would give him face as she led a group of people to attend. No matter what, he was Qiao Yinyan's father. No matter what, after Mo Yuying's matter was settled, perhaps Qiao Yinyan would become her brother-in-law? Chapter 3876. In addition, Yiqing Luo also knew that Patriarch Qiao had been so passionate towards her from the start. Which was also the reason why Qiao Yinyan took care of her. It was because of Guiyu. That's right, it was teacher Guiyu. While she and the rest were heading towards the Earth boundary, Guiyu contacted his good brother in the Earth boundary, which was Patriarch Qiao. After praising her to the heavens, Yi Zichen's eyes widened. All sorts of hints, she was definitely the type that Qiao Yinyan liked, and could definitely become his daughter-in-law. Hence, Patriarch Qiao was so naive to be fooled. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Looking at Guiyu and Patriarch Qiao's character, now I know why the two of them became good brothers. But what made Yiqing Luo puzzled was, from yesterday till now, Qiao Yinyan was like a perverted idiot, hiding in a corner from time to time, using a resentful, painful, helpless and complicated gaze to stare at Mo Yuying. Really? None. Time. None. Engraved. And it was at any location in the Qiao residence, no repeat locations. Mo Yuying didn't feel anything. Because she totally didn't notice Qiao Yinyan's existence. Unless Yiqing Luo talked to her. The rest of the time, she was alone, immersed in her own thoughts, sitting there stiffly. Very obedient. Obedient, like a puppet without a soul. Empty, lifeless. But Yiqing Luo expressed that she was troubled. For example, if a person suddenly popped up from the side and stared at the person next to you with such a complicated gaze that made people's hearts tremble, it would be very difficult to imagine such a scene. Once, twice, thrice. How would you feel in your heart? Anyway, Yiqing Luo was going crazy. Several times she wanted to ask Qiao Yinyan to come over. Whatever it was, couldn't it be said clearly? Did he have to be so perverted? Was there something wrong with him? But, before she could open her mouth, Qiao Yinyan was like a ghost, disappearing. Yiqing Luo. This was the first time she knew. Qiao Yinyan looked like a high mountain flower. And he had such a special hobby. He was annoyed by the various profound practitioners of the major forces who came to visit him with all kinds of excuses, such as thanking him, giving him gifts, and so on. She was also flustered by Qiao Yinyan's perverted hobby. Yiqing Luo decisively pulled the group of people, preparing to head over to the treasures exchange hall. Because of the auction. Dmo Xian still had things to deal with. Jun Qingwu also went to help. After all, the historian of balance was involved. This matter would definitely blow up. People of high positions like them definitely had to deal with it. Kitty Li wanted to follow. Zhou Mo, on the other hand, used other fun toys to kidnap Kitty Li. In the end, only Mo Yuing, Gue Wu, Old Lai and a few others were left, and they all went to the treasures gathering exchange house. Along the way, Old Lai had been sizing up the ghost marshal. He felt that Gue Wu was very familiar. However, he could not recall where he had seen it before. He just kept staring at it. Gue Wu's eyes were fixed on Old Lai, completely ignoring him. It was Yiqing Luo who couldn't stand it any longer as she patted Old Lai's arm. "Why are you staring at Master Gue Wu for? If I didn't know better, I would think that you've fallen for him." Lao Lai scratched his messy hair and frowned. "I just think, he looks familiar." Upon hearing those words, Gue Wu slightly raised his eyebrows. He took a cold glance and retracted his gaze. "This feeling is even more familiar." Lao Lai patted his head, "But I just can't recall where I've seen him before." "Think slowly, no hurry." Yiqing Luo shot a glance at Gue Wu's expressionless face. Chapter 3877. After listening to Yiqing Luo's words, Old Lai really leaned forward and stared at Gue Wu from a close distance, as though he couldn't wait to stick his eyes onto Gue Wu. Fortunately, Gue Wu's character was indifferent. He treated Old Lai as though he was nothing and totally ignored Old Lai's actions. If it was anyone else, to be stared at like this by Old Lai, he would probably have flown into a rage. Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered with Old Lai as she hooked Mo Yuing, who was walking quietly behind her, and smiled. "Shadow is so obedient." Mo Yuing was hugged as her shoulder bumped into Yiqing Luo's arms. She blinked her eyes at Yiqing Luo, ? Yiqing Luo rubbed her furry head as she hooked her little body and continued to walk forward with a smile. Very quickly, the four of them arrived at the treasure exchange hall. Just arrived at the treasure exchange hall, Yiqing Luo almost thought that she had taken the wrong way. Because there were at least hundreds of people crowding around the entrance of the treasure exchange hall. They were split into two teams. One team, everyone was holding various kinds of treasures in their hands. There were jade boxes, medicine bottles, big wooden boxes, weapons on their backs, etc. One team, empty-handed but with an anxious expression. There were some people who were holding crystal notes in their hands as they counted them. The common characteristic of the two teams was brocaded clothes and jade belt, fair and plump, extremely wealthy. What situation was this? This group of people came to the treasure exchange hall to deposit their auction items and to purchase trading items? When did the market in the treasure exchange hall become so good? The most important thing was, at this critical juncture when the Earth realm was suffering from heavy losses, there were still so many people who had the leisure to come to the treasure exchange hall. Those who are ambitious will not let go of any chance to build connections. Mo Yuing, who was hooked by her shoulder in her arms, said faintly. Yiqing Luo lowered her head and looked at the stiffened and emotionless person. She stretched out her hand and pinched her cheek. Shadow is right. These people were indeed like what Mo Yuing said. It was obvious that he was here to do business at the treasures exchange hall. But in actual fact, everyone's motive was very clear. If it was in the past, the treasure exchange hall was. If you wanted to pass, you would have to make a detour. Now, even if Bao Bao won the honor of the best trading house in the auction fair with the beautifying cream, that wasn't to the extent of, with so many people surrounding the treasure house, not even a drop of water could leak through. The main reason was still because Pei Sheng was a collateral descendant of the Huangfu clan, one of the four great clans in the heavenly world. Old Master Huangfu even came to welcome them personally. In everyone's eyes, Pei Sheng would definitely follow the old man to the heavenly realm. If he had befriended Pei Sheng before he left, he would have been delighted. Or perhaps, he wanted Pei Sheng to owe him a favor. Once Pei Sheng stabilized his position in the Huangfu family, this was a way out for the people of the Earth domain. Therefore, one after another, they came to the treasures gathering exchange to make their presence known. From the looks of it, Pei Sheng's place was not as quiet as the Qiao mansion. A group of people were queuing up and craning their necks. From time to time, he would raise his arm to wipe the sweat off his forehead. They were a bunch of pampered people. It was basically not their turn to do things like lining up. However, this time was different. After all, they were here to make a good impression. Naturally, they had to do it personally so that they could show their sincerity. At the forefront, the people from both sides stuck close together as they craned their necks to look at the situation in the treasure exchange hall. Chapter 3878. The entrance of treasure gathering hall was simply too small. The two of them stood at the entrance. There was basically no space. Just at this moment, suddenly, a hand reached over and pressed on their shoulders. With a little force, the two of them were forcibly pulled apart. The two of them who were impatient couldn't suppress the anger in their hearts. Can't you see that everyone is queuing up? Why are you cutting the queue? Get to the back of the queue. Don't break the rules. The two of them reached out to grab the hand on their shoulders. When they turned their heads, they saw an old and horrifying face. Especially the red bloodstain on the eye, as if flesh and blood were surging. The two of them were so shocked that they took a few steps back. The hand that was grabbing that person also flung it away. Get out of the way. That person clapped his hands and spat out two words coldly. The two of them looked at that person's face, then their gazes fell on the few figures behind that person. They were so scared that their faces turned pale, and they immediately moved to the side. While nodding and bowing, "Please, please, please come in," the man raised his head high and swaggered into the treasure exchange hall. The few people behind him also followed in. Until the few figures walked through the door. The two people in the queue, this time, wiped the sweat off their foreheads and heaved a sigh of relief. Who are those people? Why aren't they queuing? Just because he said to give way, we have to give way? The people at the back of the queue didn't see the faces of those people clearly. They only saw that those people cut the queue and were even welcomed into the treasure exchange. They, who had queued for half a day, had complaints in their hearts. However, just as they opened their mouths to complain, someone immediately turned his head and looked at the few people with a face full of fear. Shoo! Don't shout, if they hear you, you won't even be able to enter the treasure exchange today. The few people who were complaining frowned and craned their necks to look at the entrance of the gathering treasures exchange hall. They asked suspiciously, who are those people? Who have such great power? It could be said that there were hundreds of people queuing outside, randomly pulling one out. They were all famous people in the Earth domain. Who else could make them show such frightened expressions? Did you see that old man just now? The one who walked in first, is someone from Hell Palace. Hell Palace? The person who complained immediately turned pale. The terror of the Hell Palace was that the people inside were all lunatics. It was no wonder that the two people standing at the entrance would step aside and respectfully let the old man cut the queue. If it was them, they would rather let the people from the Underworld Palace cut the queue. He didn't want to provoke trouble from Hell Palace, not just that. Someone shook his head and clicked his tongue. What's the purpose of you lining up at the treasures exchange hall? Although everyone was well aware of it. But when asked this question, the few people who complained still shook their heads and didn't answer. That person did not pursue the matter. Instead, he said straightforwardly, didn't everyone come here to get to know Boss Pei of the treasures exchange? Did you see the lady in red who just went in? That young lady is Yi Qing Luo. When the three words, Yi Qing Luo, came out from that person's mouth. In the queue, there was a silence that lasted as long as 3 sides. Then, there was an explosion. Who was Yi Qing Luo? She was a famous person now. How many people racked their brains to rush to the Qiao residence just to meet Yi Qing Luo? They had not expected that Yi Qing Luo actually came to the Treasures Exchange Hall. No wonder those people automatically gave way. Chapter 3879. For this treasure-gathering exchange hall to have such a scene. It was all because of Yi Qing Luo. At once, the hundreds of people queuing outside were all discussing about Yi Qing Luo's legend. Their words were filled with admiration and envy towards Yi Qing Luo. No one noticed. At the corner opposite the treasure-gathering exchange hall, a shadow was cast downwards. A slender figure could be seen faintly. When he heard those praises and flattery, he was stunned. Faintly that figure clenched her fists tightly. In the darkness, that pair of eyes was like a venomous snake, shining with a sinister glint. After Yi Qing Luo and the rest stepped into the treasure-gathering exchange hall, they also heard those people's discussions outside. Her brows rose as her eyes were filled with ridicule. These people kept on praising and praising her, but it was merely done in front of so many people. More than that, he just wanted to please her. After all, her age was right there. Young ladies of this age, didn't they love that bit of praise and flattery? But in actual fact, what they were thinking in their hearts, whether they were convinced or not, that was something only they themselves knew. So those praises outside intentionally became louder and louder. Yi Qing Luo totally ignored them. After she walked into the treasure gathering, she directly walked towards the direction of the counter. At the counter, stood 2 customers. One was here to register, to take part in the next round of the treasure gathering auction. The other was here to present treasures. The commotion outside was extremely loud. The few people inside naturally heard it clearly. When Yi Qing Luo walked in, those 2 customers had already put on a smile, as they greeted Yi Qing Luo politely. Behind the counter, the 2 busy people immediately raised their heads and looked towards Yi Qing Luo. Gu Zixi took a look at Yi Qing Luo, as she smiled and called out, "Ah Luo." She lowered her head again, as she continued to record the customer's name list. Perhaps it was because yesterday, Yi Qing Luo's attitude towards Pei Sheng was slightly solemn. On seeing Yi Qing Luo, Pei Sheng immediately raised his head anxiously, as his eyes looked at Yi Qing Luo helplessly, as he speedily left. The booklet and brush in his hands dropped onto the ground. This look seemed like a student meeting his own form teacher. Yi Qing Luo, what was going on? Did she look that fierce? Sheng. Gu Zixi heard the noise beside her and immediately looked at Pei Sheng worriedly. When he saw the brush by Pei Sheng's feet, he immediately bent over to pick it up. Zixi. I'm fine. Pei Sheng sounded nervous. After that, he took a careful look at Yi Qing Luo and immediately squatted down, helping her to pick up the things. The 2 of them picked up the items at the same time, stood up, and put them on the counter at the same time. Their hands collided. After a short pause, the 2 of them raised their heads at the same time and looked at each other. Soon after, a large blush spread on their faces. At the same time, the 2 of them quickly retracted their hands as if they had touched a flame. With a bashful look, she averted her gaze. Yi Qing Luo and the rest. Baffled, were they fed another mouthful of dog food? The other 3 didn't have much of a reaction. It was mainly Yi Qing Luo who was watching this dramatic scene. For some reason, her mind was filled with images of the pure romance of youth on campus. It seemed that the style was a little wrong. Wasn't this couple a little too silly? Chapter 3880. Sheng. Zixi. Yo ho, that voice which was filled with obvious ridicule intentionally dragged out the last syllable. It made that pair of pure young man and woman flushed red instantly. Looking at their looks, Yiqing Luo also knew that these two had absolutely confirmed their relationship. Gu Zishi had waited for so many years. In any case, Pei Sheng understood his inner thoughts. That was not a bad growth at all. Yiqing Luo walked towards the counter. The two guests tactfully made way for him. Yiqing Luo smiled at the both of them. Carry on with your work, we're just here to have a chat with Pei Sheng. Saying that, she waved to Old Lai. Old Lai, I'll leave this task to you. Old Lai? She didn't mention anything about letting him be a free laborer. No matter how unwilling he was in his heart or on his face. But looking at Yiqing Luo's smiling eyes, his body still obediently walked to the side of the counter. Previously, when they stayed at the treasure gathering, Old Lai and Xiao Yinyan helped out at the treasure gathering. When they did things, they wouldn't be flustered. Old Lai replaced Pei Sheng's position and Yiqing Luo waved her hand, asking Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi to come over to rest. Those two customers looked at Pei Sheng, who left the counter, and looked at Old Lai, who was holding the brush with an impatient look. They were so scared that their sweat soaked their clothes. But under Old Lai's threatening gaze, they were practically trembling as they completed their own transaction. On the other side, the two of them who had been busy for the entire morning finally had some time to rest. They had just walked to the side and sat down. Pei Sheng's gaze towards Yiqing Luo was still filled with that reserved feeling. Yiqing Luo sighed, have you forgotten what I said to you yesterday? Between us, we are friends, partners, not some superior and subordinate. Why are you so afraid of me? Pei Sheng's hand which was holding the teacup tightened as his eyelashes trembled unnaturally. I. His voice was slightly low. Speaking till the end, his entire head lowered. The aura from you is too strong. Yiqing Luo. Her aura was 2 meters 8. How could he be scared to this extent? It seemed that she was very cute in front of her brothers, okay? Gu Zishi couldn't help but laughed as she shook her head at Yiqing Luo. There's no need to specially correct his thinking. It's good that he's afraid of you, at least you can control him. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at Pei Sheng. This feeling makes it seem as though I'm very fiendish. My aura is too strong, so why isn't Zishi afraid of me? Pei Sheng glanced at Gu Zishi and blushed again. This innocent look really made Yiqing Luo have an impulse to tease her. But he thought of Pei Sheng's character. She resisted the urge. Don't be teased by her. Pei Sheng started to question himself again. He wondered if he was worthy of Gu Zishi, and then he fell into self-denial. After all, to Pei Sheng, her aura was too strong. Look at how nervous you are. Gu Zishi couldn't help but stretched out her hand as she poked Pei Sheng's shoulder and looked towards Yiqing Luo as she asked, you came running over to gather treasures, is it to hide from those guests who had gone to Qiao residence to visit? Yiqing Luo clicked her tongue, you really dote on your Sheng. Gu Zishi's question was obviously telling Pei Sheng. She came over to gather treasures, not to ask for an answer as to whether he was going to Heaven Realm or staying in Earth Realm, but to hide from the various powerhouses' cultivators. Chapter 3881. As expected, after Yiqing Luo nodded in response to Gu Zishi's words, Pei Sheng heaved a sigh of relief. He felt much more relaxed. Seeing Pei Sheng's reaction, Yiqing Luo felt more and more that she was really like a form teacher. Moreover, her aura was 2.8 meters and she could kill people with just one look. Forget it. If Pei Sheng wanted to be nervous, so be it. Anyway, he wasn't the one who was nervous. Yiqing Luo glanced at the two customers who were listening to their conversation with their ears pricked up. Then, he looked at Pei Sheng, raised his eyebrows, and reminded him, the business of treasure gathering has improved. If you want to hold an auction, are you sure you have extra time? It wasn't easy to organize an auction. In particular, only he and Gu Zishi were busy at the Treasures Exchange Hall. If he wanted to hold a successful auction, he would need at least 10 days to half a month of preparation time. However, the Huangfu clan only gave him 3 days to consider. If he chose to stay in the land, this auction was naturally not a problem. However, if he chose to return to the Heaven Realm. Now that he had made so many deals, at that time, how could they still be in charge of the auction? The problem which Yi Qing Luo mentioned, Pei Sheng really hadn't thought about it. Instantly, his eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at Yi Qing Luo. He looked at Pei Sheng's expression. Yi Qing Luo could roughly guess it. Pei Sheng was more inclined to follow old man Huangfu to the Heaven Realm from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have revealed such a shocked expression. But that's true. For Pei Sheng, who had lost all his family members after witnessing his father drown himself in the river, Pei Sheng's heart sank. His family was really his biggest weakness. Even if he knew it was a tiger's den. However, he couldn't help but want to give it a try. This was human nature and a very normal way of thinking. I actually forgot such an important thing. Gu Zishi's pretty face paled. I was too happy to see so many customers coming to the Treasures Exchange Hall. I didn't think too much about it. She immediately stood up, ran over to the counter, and brought over the list of names she had recorded. Since yesterday, I have already booked at least 400 people. What should I do? Pei Sheng stared blankly at the booklet that Gu Zishi was flipping through. A trace of pain and entanglement surfaced on his face. Could it be, this was the will of the heavens, even the heavens felt that, should he stay in the land? Pei Sheng's thoughts were too obvious. Yi Qing Luo raised her hand and pressed down the booklet that Gu Zishi was flipping through. Both of them turned to look at her. Yi Qing Luo took the booklet from Gu Zishi's hand, closed it and pressed it on the table. She looked at Pei Sheng calmly with a pair of charming eyes that didn't contain a hint of a smile. That invisible pressure. Immediately, Pei Sheng became nervous again. Yi Qing Luo pressed on the booklet, her voice was very calm and light, without much emotion. Why do you feel that it's hard to choose? This kind of thing is easy to resolve, isn't it? But it happened. She spoke in a calm tone. On the contrary, it made them feel even more pressured. That was what Pei Sheng thought. His handsome face turned slightly pale. Gu Zishi, who was standing to one side, finally understood what Pei Sheng meant by a powerful aura. This kind of aura, if placed on a normal person, would not be able to withstand it. Most of them would be so scared that their legs would go soft, right? Chapter 3882. Pei Sheng's expression turned blank when he heard Yi Qing Luo's question. His brows creased tightly into a bundle. Towards Yi Qing Luo's question, he didn't know how to answer. His mind was in a mess. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she continued to ask, since you've already booked so many customers, you need to think of a way to deal with it, isn't it? Pei Sheng slowly lowered his head, his face filled with pain and confusion. Seeing that he didn't reply, Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a smile. Only her laughter was mixed with some ridicule. Why not? Let me give you an idea. Although he felt that Yi Qing Luo's laughter was a little strange, and there was an inexplicable thorn in his heart. But, hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, Pei Sheng still swiftly raised his head and looked at Yi Qing Luo. The moment he raised his head, he met with Yi Qing Luo's eyes, which seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. That pair of deep and serene eyes were very black. It was that kind of extreme black. It was obviously that kind of seductive eyes. But it made one's heart tremble with respect and fear. Why don't you just throw away the mess that is treasure gathering and just walk away from it? Anyway, you're someone who is going to Heaven Realm, so it doesn't matter how this place turns into, isn't it? These people came to treasure gathering, it's because you're a branch relative of the Huangfu family. Even if you leave with the Huangfu family, leaving this mess behind, I think these people will not blame you. After Yiqing Luo finished her words, she propped her chin as her eyes curved as she looked at him. Between her brows, she was obviously smiling. But Pei Xing sensed an eerie chill from that smile. The two customers who were registering by the side. Could she care about them a little? They were still present. Was it really all right to tell them their purpose of coming like there was no one else around? No. No way. She almost blurted it out. Pei Xing's eyes widened as he shook his head hard. Absolutely not. Treasure Gathering Trading Hall is my father's blood and sweat. 5 years ago, my father was framed by Zhongqing Trading Hall and ruined the reputation of treasure gathering. Now, treasure gathering has finally returned to everyone's sight. I absolutely cannot let treasure gathering's reputation be tarnished. Throw away this mess and leave or something. How could he possibly do that? Yiqing Luo smiled. This time, there was a different gentleness to her smile. She was still holding her chin. He was in the same position as before. It was just that the aura emitted from his body was slightly restrained. Since you feel that this method is not feasible, then, what are you going to do? Yiqing Luo asked with a smile. Pei Xing fell silent again. Yiqing Luo didn't urge him to reply at all. A moment later, in this strange atmosphere, Pei Xing moved his mouth and softly spat out a few words. I will stay in the land. Yiqing Luo raised her brows and continued to smile. No regrets? Pei Xing wanted to say that he didn't regret it. But when the words reached his mouth, it was as if something was stuck in his throat, and he couldn't spit them out no matter what. Don't you regret it? He didn't know. He really didn't know. Yiqing Luo laughed out loud at this moment. The hand she used to support her chin had already changed to the back of her hand to support her temples, looking very lazy. You don't answer, but you already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Yiqing Luo's straightforwardness made Pei Xing's face turn slightly pale. He clenched his fists, opened and closed them again. Chapter 3883. Pei Xing pursed her lips tightly. It was impossible to tell what expression Zhang Xian had on his face. Yiqing Luo shut her mouth again. She was still calm and didn't urge him to answer. He was using this 8-meter-tall aura to oppress him. After the silence of half an incense stick of time, Pei Xing seemed to have mustered up his courage. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins appeared on his fingertips. He plucked up his courage as he raised his head and looked at Yiqing Luo, as his voice was slightly trembling as he spoke. I'm thinking, to discuss with old Master Huang Fu, to wait till the Treasures Trading House's auction is held, then I'll go to Heaven Realm with him. After finishing this sentence, Pei Xing let out a long sigh. Following that, he looked at Yiqing Luo anxiously. He was like a primary school student checking his teacher's homework. It was as if he was afraid that he had answered the question wrongly. Yiqing Luo slowly straightened her body. He was no longer as lazy as before. A pair of extremely dark and enchanting eyes stared straight into his eyes. Pei Xing immediately tensed up. His hand subconsciously clenched his sleeves. Until, Puchi. The sound broke the increasingly heavy atmosphere. Pei Xing looked at Yiqing Luo in a daze. She smiled. And he was smiling very brightly. It was not the kind of laughter that would make one's hair stand on end. Pei Xing was dazed by Yiqing Luo's smile. Yiqing Luo just smiled like that, and even raised her brows while smiling as she opened her mouth. Continue speaking. Say what? Pei Xing was dumbfounded. But seeing Yiqing Luo's smile, he subconsciously continued, I think, if we talk about it, old Master Huangfu will agree. I will try my best to convince him. I think, this is the best way to deal with it. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a smile. Now do you feel that saying out what you want to say isn't as difficult as you imagined? Pei Sheng was startled. Yi Qing Luo replied, do you feel much better after saying it out? You don't feel that much pressure anymore? Pei Sheng's pupils constricted and reddened. His eyes were filled with gratitude. Only now did he understand. Yi Qing Luo had been asking aggressively, not because she was making things difficult for him. Instead, it was guiding him. Guide him to make the choice he wanted the most in his heart. Guide him and deal with things that should be his to decide. Guide him and begin to grow. Yi Qing Luo patted his shoulder lightly. Remember how you feel now. In future, don't reveal a dazed and helpless expression no matter what happens. This will give others a chance to take advantage of you and also make Zishi worry for you. Yi Qing Luo gently patted his shoulder. Don't worry about me. Pei Sheng nodded vigorously. He then looked at Gu Zishi, who was beside him, and squeezed her hand. The two looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, ha ha ha, suddenly, a deep and steady laughter came from afar. In the next instant, a figure appeared in the hall of the treasure-gathering hall. When he saw who it was, the two guests at the side immediately felt their legs go soft, and they knelt on the ground. The people sitting around the chairs also stood up. Old Master Huangfu. The guest spoke with a trembling voice, filled with excitement and fear. Yi Qing Luo took a look at the smiling Huangfu Zhentian. She winked at old Lai. Lao Lai immediately dropped the brush in his hand, picked up a guest with each hand, and walked toward the door. After that, he threw the two guests out. He clapped his hands and closed the door with a paw. The hundreds of people from various powerhouses who were still queuing? What situation was this? They had queued for so long. Chapter 3884. However, no matter how the people outside talked or how they knocked on the door, the tightly shut door did not respond at all. Thinking about how Yi Qing Luo and the rest had just entered. Later on, it seemed that even the big boss from the heaven realm had entered, even if everyone had doubts and complaints in their hearts. Even so, he did not dare to force his way in. They could only choose, they could either leave or wait patiently in the queue. Within the treasure-gathering hall, because of Huangfu Zhentian's appearance, the relaxed atmosphere from before instantly became heavy. Even Pei Sheng, compared to when he saw Yi Qing Luo, was even more uneasy as he stood ramrod straight with both hands hanging by his side. The others frowned slightly and looked at him without blinking. Huangfu Zhentian didn't feel that his appearance had affected anything at all. He laughed heartily as he walked towards Pei Sheng. Because of this smile, his solemn and dignified face looked a little benevolent. He looked at Pei Sheng with a gentle gaze. He walked up to Pei Sheng and patted Pei Sheng's shoulder. It was just this action. Pei Sheng was so shocked that his body tensed up. He was incomparably stiff. Even his breathing was so nervous that it was extremely slow. Huangfu Zhentian seemed as if he completely didn't notice Pei Sheng's nervousness. He didn't feel that the atmosphere in the room was very heavy. With a smile on his face, he patted Pei Sheng's shoulder and said, "Good lad, grandfather heard everything you said just now. You promised to follow grandfather back to the Huangfu clan, but grandfather took it seriously." Pei Sheng's expression became even more complicated when he called him grandfather. Coupled with Huangfu Zhentian's benevolence that was completely different from yesterday and the intimate action of patting his shoulder, Huangfu Zhentian's expression changed. This shocked Pei Sheng to the point that he was excited, and terrified. His heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was going to jump out of his throat. "Brat, your friend did the right thing. The best way to deal with this matter is to find a way to solve it yourself." Huangfu Zhentian patted Pei Sheng again before retracting his hand as he looked at Yi Qing Luo with a face full of smiles. "Miss Yi, many thanks for guiding this fellow to find the right way. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled. In that case, you've agreed to Ah Sheng's condition? A wisp of a bright light flashed past Huangfu Zhentian's dignified and wise eyes. It was gone in a flash. But it didn't escape Yi Qing Luo's eyes. Subsequently, Huangfu Zhentian glanced at Pei Sheng with deep meaning and said, "That depends on how this kid convinces me." Pei Sheng tensed up again. He was slightly dazed by Huangfu Zhentian's intentionally intimate attitude. He originally thought that Huangfu Zhentian would agree readily. However, he didn't expect Huangfu Zhentian to say this. However, Yi Qing Luo's smile grew even wider as she nodded in agreement. "What old master Huangfu said is right, I feel the same way too." The old man and the young man looked at each other and smiled. They then turned to look at Pei Sheng at the same time. Pei Sheng could only feel a tinge of coldness rising from his back amidst his anxiety and fear. Suddenly, a sharp and hurried voice sounded, "No, you can't. Grandfather, you can't agree so easily." Then, Huangfu and the other two broke into the room. Huangfu Fengyan pounced over and hugged Huangfu Zhentian's hand while biting her lower lip tightly. "Grandfather, Pei Sheng has Huangfu family's blood in him. Bringing him back to Huangfu family is already his grace. Grandfather has already taken a step back and allowed him to bring a useless lowly lady back to Huangfu family. He still had many requests." Chapter 3885. As Huangfu Fengyan was speaking, she shot a sinister glare towards Gu Zixi direction. But when she looked towards Huangfu Zhentian, her beautiful face was replaced with sincerity and sincerity. As though every single word was for the sake of the Huangfu family. The moment the three of them appeared, they surrounded Huangfu Zhentian in the middle. Evidently, they had witnessed everything that had happened earlier. On seeing their old master and Yi Qing Luo smiling at each other, as though their relationship was extremely intimate, they finally couldn't hold it in any longer. They absolutely could not let old master develop any interest towards that slut Yi Qing Luo. Otherwise, if they had old master's support, wouldn't Yi Qing Luo be able to do whatever she wanted? Huangfu Fengyan was thinking furiously in her heart. Suddenly her eyes went blurry. A black shadow flashed past. Her body was locked down by an enormous force. "Pa!" A crisp slap resounded in the hall. Huangfu Fengyan could only feel her ears buzzing. Her cheek was burning in pain. It made her realize what had happened. She raised her hand and covered her cheek, which was slapped. She stared fiercely at the person who made a move on her. This stare met with a young lady's scornful gaze. The young lady in front of her was dressed in a blazing red robe, peerlessly beautiful. A head of silky black hair cascaded down onto that slender shoulder. There wasn't a single piece of decoration on her, simple yet elegant. Her entire person was filled with a lazy, undisciplined temperament. However, the young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. That unattainable peerless elegance between her brows made one feel intimidated with just one look. Huangfu Fengyan was the same. She only raised her head to take a look. Even the question about being slapped was stuck in her throat. "Who are you talking about, lowly woman?" Yi Qing Luo raised her chin as her voice was icy cold. Huangfu Fengtan was agitated by this cold words as she shuddered, as though she suddenly woke up. Half of her swollen red face instantly emitted an intense pain. Her eyes were fuming with anger as she pointed towards Gu Zixi and Yi Qing Luo in a flustered and exasperated manner. "I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about the both of you." "Oh." Yi Qing Luo calmly replied with a word. His tone was so noble and aloof. Huangfu Fengyan's heart was filled with rage, but when she heard this her face turned pale. "Poochie," a chuckle could be heard. Gu Zixi covered her mouth, her eyes crinkling as she smiled. Her pretty face was full of ridicule and ridicule. Huangfu Fengyan's eyes seemed to have been pierced. A conversation suddenly popped up in his mind. Lowly woman, who are you talking about? You. Wasn't she calling herself a lowly woman? Her face instantly turned red. Her usually beautiful and arrogant face now had a sinister and terrifying expression on it. Damn slut. How dare he humiliate her like this? Grandfather. Huangfu Fengyan was angered to the point that her eyes turned red and tears gushed out. They are simply bullying people intolerably. Going too far? Yiqing Luo scoffed lightly as she raised her long arm and hooked onto Gu Zixi shoulder. Following that, her slender body seemed to be boneless as she leaned lazily on Gu Zixi. Her eyes were filled with smiles, but there wasn't a single trace of a smile in her eyes. You're just a lowly woman, what right do you have to bully my Zixi? I'm afraid you don't know that if it wasn't for Zixi, the Sheng you see now would be a corpse. Although her words were said while looking at Huangfu Fengyan. Chapter 3886. Huangfu Trio's expressions were extremely ugly. Especially Huangfu Fengyan, after she heard this sentence, her eyes were bloodshot. Lowly woman? She was the dignified Huangfu family's fourth miss, how could she be compared to a woman from the Earth realm? Damn Yiqing Luo. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Huangfu Qifei's gentle eyes flashed past a glint. After taking a look at Huangfu Zhentian, he took quick steps towards Huangfu Fengyan as he held on to Huangfu Fengyan's shoulder with one hand, bringing her trembling body to the back of Huangfu Zhentian. Fengyan, grandfather has finally found cousin Pei Sheng, this is a joyous occasion, don't mess around. Huangfu Qifei's voice was very gentle, with a sense of pacification. Huangfu Fengyan bit her lower lip tightly, as the blood-red color in her eyes had not dispersed. But it had quietened down. Huangfu Zhentian's white brows creased tightly. His expression was unfriendly as he looked at Huangfu Fengyan unhappily, before looking at Yiqing Luo. His tightly creased brows creased even tighter. Miss Yi. He pondered for a moment and spoke in a grave tone, Fengyan is too rash and offended you and this Miss Gu, but Fengyan is after all our Huangfu family's 4,000 gold, will Miss Yi please consider carefully before you make a move next time. This matter was indeed Huangfu Fengyan's problem. Huangfu Zhentian couldn't very well accuse Yiqing Luo's actions. But Huangfu Fengyan was after all his granddaughter, and a member of his Huangfu family. If she was so easily bullied by others, wouldn't that make others look down on Huangfu family? Especially when it was in the lower realm. But for Huangfu Zhentian, based on his status. Indeed, he had lowered himself to a very low level. His meaning was very clear. He gave her face. And hoped that she would give Huangfu family some face on his account, and give Huangfu family some face. This matter of beating up Huangfu Fengyan would end like this. Yiqing Luo naturally heard the meaning behind Huangfu Zhentian's words. She raised her brows as she smiled and nodded, all right, next time before I make a move, I will definitely inform you. Huangfu Zhentian. After talking for so long, you still want to fight? Yiqing Luo shrugged her shoulders as she spread out her hands helplessly, you've seen it for yourself, it's not that I'm willing to take action, but some people are itching for a beating and insist on coming over to be beaten. Old Master also knows that for a kind-hearted person like me, how would I bear to reject someone's fervent request, right? You. How would Huangfu Fengyan not hear the sarcasm in Yiqing Luo's words as she gritted her teeth and stared at Yiqing Luo? He hadn't even raised his hand and pointed at Yiqing Luo. However, he was forced back by Huangfu Zhentian's gaze. Yiqing Luo didn't even spare Huangfu Fengyan a glance. Instead, he pushed Gu Zixi in front of the old man. Then, with a calm gaze, he looked at the old man and enunciated each word clearly. Don't think that your heaven realm is so good, or that the Huangfu family is so good. Everyone here is very clear on how difficult it is for a large family to survive. Don't say anything. Pei Sheng and Zishi have gone to the Huangfu clan. You can take care of them. When we really go to the Huangfu clan, you won't have the time to ask them. Whereas Zishi has her own power in the Earth realm, able to call the shots. Why must she give up everything and follow him to the Huangfu clan? To face all the dangers and fear, all those unknown things. Do you think she's stupid? She gave up everything in the Earth realm and followed Ah Sheng to the Heaven realm, just because she loves Ah Sheng. Chapter 38-87. Yi Qing Luo's straightforward words made Gu Zishi's face turn red. She was pushed in front of old Master Huang. Hearing Yi Qing Luo praising herself in various ways, she was even more embarrassed. She didn't even dare to raise her head to look at old Master Huang. Especially when she heard Yi Qing Luo saying, "To have your own force, to call the wind and summon the rain," her expression changed slightly. She had not expected, Yi Qing Luo had already seen through it. But, to tell the truth, her so-called force, as compared to the Huangfu family, was indeed a world of difference. She wanted to move away. But her back was blocked by Yi Qing Luo's hand. Soon after, the girl's cold yet extremely clear voice drilled into one's heart. So, Zishi doesn't owe your Huangfu family anything, but Pei Sheng owes Zishi. Her brows rose as her cold voice called out Pei Sheng's name. Ah Sheng, am I right? Pei Sheng was stunned by the 2-meter-8 aura once again. Especially when he heard Yi Qing Luo's words. He was even more dazed. The gaze he used to look at Gu Zishi was filled with heartache and guilt. So he hurriedly nodded his head vigorously. Even withstanding the pressure from Huangfu Zhentian, he strode to Gu Zishi's side and held her hand. Zishi. Sorry. And, really thank you. Willing to give up everything for him. Such a beautiful lady. He would use his entire life to repay her. Pei Sheng took the initiative to get closer and held her hand. This made Gu Zishi's anxious heart instantly calm down. To her, Pei Sheng was her calming pill. As long as Pei Sheng's feelings towards her and his heart towards her no longer wavered, she had nothing to fear. Her originally apprehensive and slightly bashful blushing face was now filled with a blissful and sweet smile. Her and Pei Sheng's hands were intertwined tightly as her eyes were filled with tenderness. Yi Qing Luo looked on from the side as her lips curled into a satisfied smile. To make Pei Sheng take the initiative to walk to Gu Zishi's side at this moment, to give her comfort and warmth. This was Pei Sheng's biggest improvement. As expected. As long as it was related to love. It could give a person a huge amount of courage. But the sweet atmosphere between Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi. In her or Grandpa Sheng's eyes, it was sweet. But in the eyes of Huangfu and the other two, it was extremely glaring. Especially looking at the smile on Yi Qing Luo's lips. Huangfu Fengyan's eyeballs were about to pop out. Anger surged in his heart. She couldn't help but sneer. Her voice was sharp because of her anger. You make it sound nice. What do you mean by your own forces? What do you mean by giving up everything? To put it bluntly, aren't you just trying to curry favor with the powerful? Using Pei Sheng to climb up the ranks of the Huangfu family? What kind of power can rival our Huangfu clan? Feng Yan. Huangfu Feng Yan spoke rudely once more and completely infuriated Huangfu Zhentian. Huangfu Zhentian shouted out fiercely, and the gaze he shot at Huangfu Feng Yan was filled with a stern warning. Huangfu Feng Yan pouted and lowered her head. Without waiting for Huangfu Zhentian to apologize to Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo had already burst out laughing. Between his brows, there was a lazy and elegant expression. However, the words that came out of his mouth were extremely cold. Old Master, you've seen it for yourself. It's not that I don't want to give Old Master face. But her voice sounded like she was laughing. laughing so much that it made one's hair stand on end. Following that, her vision slowly shifted towards Huangfu Fengyan. The smile on the corners of her lips became even thicker. Chapter 3888. Huangfu Fengyan's face instantly sunk as the murderous intent in her eyes surfaced. As though she couldn't wait to rush forward and tear Yiqing Luo into pieces. Facing such a gaze, Yiqing Luo totally didn't care about it. Anyway, with old Master Huangfu around, Huangfu Fengyan had no chance to make a move. Moreover, old Lai, Gue Wu and the rest were around. She was afraid that Huangfu Fengyan wouldn't make a move. As long as Huangfu Fengyan dared to make a move, she would have the reason to let Huangfu Fengyan die without any hesitation. Huangfu Fengyan, if you dare to say another word, in future no matter what occasion you are to stay in the Huangfu family obediently and not take a step out. Huangfu Zhentian was obviously infuriated by Huangfu Fengyan as his eyes widened. Was he going to ground her? Huangfu Fengyan looked at her grandfather in disbelief. But when she met her grandfather's eyes which were filled with anger, she shuddered as she hung her head down, not daring to say another word. Yiqing Luo expressed that there was still a little bit of disappointment. If they could create a ruckus, she would be able to properly teach Huangfu Fengyan a lesson. TSK. Looking at Yiqing Luo shaking her head and sighing uninterestedly. As astute as Huangfu Zhentian, how could he not see through her thoughts? Huangfu Zhentian's eyes darkened and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Very soon, his face lit up with a generous and benevolent yet dignified smile. I know that Lady Gu is a good lady. Even though I haven't spent much time with Lady Gu, I know that for you to be so unswervingly devoted to this boy when he had nothing left, you must truly be treating him with sincerity. No matter how big Miss Gu's influence in the Earth realm is, this is after all created by Miss Gu using her own hands and ability, so this is worthy of our respect. I am also very clear that Miss Gu put down everything in the Earth realm and follow this silly kid to the Heaven realm, to a foreign unknown place. How much courage did you have? I believe in Pei Sheng's foresight and choice, and I believe that I am not so old that my eyes are failing me. Huangfu Zhentian said one sentence after another, in a sincere manner. It didn't seem like it, he was just casually saying it. Gu Zixi eyes reddened as she tried to understand his words. Huangfu Zhentian smiled at Gu Zixi. Young lady, thank you so much. Gu Zixi covered her mouth. Nothing was more touching than this. She didn't care if others could understand her or misunderstand her. It was enough for her to obtain the approval of Pei Sheng's elders. Huangfu Zhentian then looked at Pei Sheng and said, "Stinking brat, treat your young lady well. She is a good lady." Pei Sheng looked at Gu Zixi and intertwined their fingers. A rare look of determination appeared on the man's handsome face. I came here today just to see you, and also to deepen your impression of your grandfather. Now that I'm done, I'll take my leave first. I won't disturb you youngsters. He stepped forward and patted Pei Sheng's shoulder before patting Gu Zixi's shoulder. With a smile, his figure flickered and he disappeared from the hall. Only the remnants of his majestic voice still lingered in the air. And the three of you, go back to the heavenly realm. Night. Huangfu Fengyan, who was scolded by Huangfu Zhentian, was lying on the bed with half of her face still swollen. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fists, pounding the bed with force. Damn Yiqing Luo. You slut. I want you to die. She angrily pounded the bed with force. Fengyan. A slightly dissatisfied voice was heard in the wind. Chapter 3889. Hearing that person's voice, Huangfu Fengyan's ferocious expression froze. She immediately looked up. She saw the man standing by the bed, staring at her with a dark expression. Huangfu Fengyan immediately sat up on the bed and shifted her gaze away from the man at a loss. She nervously called out, "Third brother." "That's right. The person who came was the third young master of the Huangfu family, Huangfu Qifei." Huangfu Qifei stared straight at her. His usually warm eyes now contained a bit of coldness. Especially after seeing her lower her head. The disdain in his eyes was even more obvious. Huangfu Qifei didn't speak for a long time. Huangfu Fengyan's heart was in a mess. From time to time, she would glance at Huangfu Qifei's eyes. Facing her third brother, she had always been in awe and fear. She wasn't even this nervous in front of her brother, Huangfu Dongyu. Huangfu Qifei clearly looked gentler and gentler than the others. But Huangfu Fengyan was clear. Under the gentle mask of her third brother, there was a hidden cruelty. "You've provoked that woman time and time again. Can't you learn to be obedient?" Huangfu Qifei finally spoke. He let out a sigh. Even the sigh of a refined and elegant young master was so gentle. His knees were on the side of the bed. Huangfu Fengyan's body trembled. She instinctively wanted to retreat. However, her chin was caught by the man's outstretched hand. Huangfu Qifei sat by the bed. He hooked her chin with one hand and moved closer. His face was as gentle as jade, and he was handsome and refined. There was even a hint of a smile in his eyes. Huangfu Qifei sighed lightly and said, "Look, your face is hurting, isn't it?" Huangfu Fengyan felt as if a poisonous snake had slid across her face. Her pupils shrank nervously. Huangfu Qifei smiled warmly. "It's okay. You'll get used to it sooner or later. Fengyan, with the situation today, our days in the future will be more difficult than now." Huangfu Fengyan was forced to meet his gaze. Looking at the gentleness in the man's eyes, she trembled. Even her lips were trembling. What habit? No. Grandfather won't. Don't you see the situation clearly? Huangfu Qifei sighed as he shook his head, Pei-sheng, that fellow now has a backer. Moreover, Yiqing Luo's performance is very obvious, she is determined to help Pei-sheng. You know very well that the power behind Yiqing Luo is not just an overlord. A wisp of a cold light flashed past the depths of Huangfu Qifei's warm eyes, and it vanished in a fleeting manner. He then looked at Huangfu Fengyan. The emotions in his eyes had returned to the gentleness of a young master. After Pei-sheng returns to Huangfu family, on account of the overlord and those powerhouses behind Yiqing Luo, they will definitely give Pei-sheng a very high position. By then, how do you think Pei-sheng will treat us? He paused slightly, his fingers caressing Huang Fengyan's face, his eyes filled with heartache. My pitiful Fengyan, such a beautiful face, how could she be so ruthless? After Pei-sheng returns to the Huangfu family, what should we do? Huangfu Qifei's voice, expression, and actions. They were all heartache and helpless towards Huangfu Fengyan. However, Huangfu Fengyan listened to his words. She only felt her body turning icy cold. She shivered as her little hands clenched tightly onto Huangfu Qifei's sleeve. As though she was grabbing onto a life-saving straw. Chapter 3890. So, what does Fengyan want to do? Huangfu Qifei held her hand instead and patted her back lightly like a big brother, comforting her with a warm voice. I want to. Huangfu Fengyan stiffly leaned into Huangfu Qifei's embrace, her eyes bursting with intense killing intent. I want him dead. Who do you want to die? Huangfu Qifei smiled warmly and slightly tightened his grip on Huangfu Fengyan's hand. Pei-sheng. She would never allow anyone to affect her position in the Huangfu family. Pei-sheng was just a lowly branch disciple. A piece of trash that didn't even have half of the Huangfu family's blood in him. She would never let Pei-sheng have any chance to climb over her head. Good girl. Huangfu Qifei smiled lightly as he placed his hand on Huangfu Fengyan's head, and his voice became even lower and gentler. Just do as you want to do. No matter what, third brother will always be behind you and shield you from the wind and rain. Huangfu Fengyan's eyelashes trembled as she clasped her hands together. Then, he hugged Huangfu Qifei tightly. Third brother, good girl. Huangfu Qifei lightly patted her head and shoulders. His voice was still so magnetic and pleasant to listen to. However, that refined and gentle face. What emerged was a chilling ruthlessness. Especially that pair of extremely bright eyes in the dark night, flowing with treacherous cold light. Within the treasures gathering exchange house. Because there were many guests on the list. Yiqing Luo and the rest also stayed behind to help tidy up the treasures. Until it was almost midnight. Yiqing Luo and the rest then prepared to leave. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi walked them to the door. After greeting, Yiqing Luo was about to leave. Pei Sheng hesitated for a while before he quickly walked to Yiqing Luo's side and whispered, "Ah Luo, I still have something to tell you." Ever since Pei Sheng sent her out, his gaze had drifted over her body from time to time. Yiqing Luo also guessed that Pei Sheng had something to tell her. She didn't expose him because she wanted Pei Sheng to take the initiative to mention it. So Yiqing Luo wasn't surprised at all, only allowing Gue Wu and the rest to make a move first. Gue Wu and the others walked far away. Pei Sheng pouted and said softly, "Today, in front of old Master Huangfu, thank you, if Yiqing Luo wasn't around." The old man's arrival and the trio's arrival. It would definitely overwhelm him and Gu Zishi. Especially that group of three, he continued to humiliate Gu Zishi. If he was angered, he would only go crazy and argue with those three people. By then, old Master Shen's impression of Zishi would be even worse. I'm just speaking the truth. Yiqing Luo took a look at Gu Zishi's direction as her lips curled, so you should really treat Zishi well. If there's a lady who is willing to give up everything for you, then that means that she really loves you, so don't let Zishi down. I know. At the mention of Zishi, the light in Pei Sheng's eyes became brighter and more determined. I won't let her down. Yiqing Luo smiled. Pei Sheng continued, actually. I have another question, Yiqing Luo asked. Pei Sheng lowered his eyes and quickly raised them to look at her. Judging from old Master Huangfu's attitude today, he should have agreed, to let me hold the auction of the treasure-gathering auction, right? After asking this question, Pei Sheng immediately lowered his head, feeling extremely apprehensive. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as she asked in reply, what do you think? I think, yes. Pei Sheng nodded. Chapter 3891. Pei Sheng's thoughts were exposed and his face flushed red. He indeed meant it this way. But there was no need to be so direct. Yiqing Luo laughed when she heard that. But the laughter made Pei Sheng feel a little guilty. He stiffened his body and as he raised his head, he clenched his fists and whispered, Old Master, he seems to be testing me. That feeling makes me breathless. Indeed he is testing you. Yiqing Luo raised her brows and nodded seriously, you're a grandson who is stranded outside and he personally came to bring you back to Huangfu family, he must be bearing a huge pressure. He naturally wants to test you, whether you have the qualification to become a member of Huangfu family. Pei Sheng's face turned pale in an instant. Large-scale families are survival of the fittest, this is the norm and also the reality. Yiqing Luo was very straightforward, with your character, if you go to Huangfu family, I'm afraid you'll be in their hands. If you really want to take root in Huangfu family and protect Zishi, then you must make yourself stronger. Her expression was very calm. Even that pair of upturned eyes seemed extremely calm. Pei Sheng, on the other hand, could tell from those extremely dark eyes that the young girl was very serious. She was teaching him the way to survive in a large family clan at high speed. As for Old Master's test, what kind of results you want, will depend on your own performance. Yiqing Luo still left the choice in his own hands. Pei Sheng looked at Yiqing Luo in a daze. After a long time, he slowly lowered his head. I know. His voice was very soft. But she could still hear the change in his tone. Thank you, Ah Luo. Yiqing Luo waved her hand and looked at the few of them who were so far away that they could not be seen. Think carefully on how to convince Old Master. I'll make a move first, you guys rest early too. Pei Sheng didn't urge her to stay. After the two of them said their goodbyes, Yiqing Luo chased after the few of them. After running for an entire street, she didn't see any signs of them. Yiqing Luo cursed silently, a bunch of heartless fellows. They actually didn't wait for me. Since she couldn't catch up, she might as well slow down her footsteps. Just as she was about to leave, her ears suddenly twitched sensitively. A haze immediately appeared in her long and narrow eyes. The expression on his face changed in an instant. Who are you? She looked warily at the wall in front of her. Just now, he had vaguely sensed a slight fluctuation coming from there. Someone, following her? Chi, an almost inaudible whooshing sound of air was extremely clear in the silent night. The moonlight shone down. It reflected the tall and imposing figure standing on the wall. The cold moonlight poured down. It made her look like a fairy from the moon, quiet and elegant like cold jade. When he saw that person, Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased as she looked at him in a daze. Zhu Wu Xian? Wasn't this person before him Zhu Wuxin? Ever since the auction's array was broken, she had not seen Zhu Wuxin. Based on Zhu Wu Xian's ability, Yiqing Luo wasn't worried that he had met with any accident. He didn't take it to heart. They had thought that he had returned to his faction. Unexpectedly, he was still in the Earth domain. And he was secretly following her. Indeed, your ability has increased by more than a little. Zhu Wu Xian's icy cold voice was mixed with a few hints of ridicule. What was he ridiculing her for? Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at him as she kept her vigilance. Don't stand so high up if you want to talk, my neck hurts. Her words had just ended. A gust of cold wind blew over. Chapter 3892. Really close. So close that the tip of his foot was pressing against hers. As long as he raised his head slightly, their breaths would collide with each other. Yiqing Luo's reaction was swift. Almost at the instant when she raised her head, she retreated 2 steps backwards, widening the distance between her and Zhu Wu Xian. Then she asked, "Why are you following me?" Zhu Wu Xian didn't move, only using that pair of black icy cold eyes to look at her quietly. His eyes were dark and heavy. Yiqing Luo couldn't tell how many emotions were hidden under that pair of eyes. He didn't speak. Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered to ask further. She walked past Zhu Wu Xian and walked towards the direction of the Qiao residence. Taking a step, Zhu Wu Xian followed closely behind. Hearing the footsteps behind her and the man's thick plum fragrance, this made Yiqing Luo unable to ignore the follower behind her. She stopped in her tracks and turned her head to look at him. "If you don't want to answer my question, then don't follow me." Zhu Wu Xian's gaze was fixed on Yiqing Luo. Looking at that pair of alluring eyes which made his heart fluttered, like the stars, dazzling eyes. He went into a daze for a moment. The lines on his face became gentler. But Yiqing Luo felt a little unnatural from his weird stare. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased into a bundle as a sliver of displeasure surfaced between her brows. "Zhu Wu Xian, if there's nothing, please don't disturb me." "Yes." Zhu Wu Xian looked at her eyes as he blurted out a word. Yiqing Luo stood on the spot. "What's the matter, say it." Zhu Wuxian's cold eyes were calm and his voice was calm without any ripples. I miss you. Yiqing Luo, goodbye, goodbye. Yiqing Luo left without turning back. Zhu Wuxian's expression congealed slightly. The lines which had finally softened suddenly turned cold and hard again. He stared at Yiqing Luo's back view. Between his brows, some black qi leaked out. Perhaps he had sensed something amiss. Yiqing Luo took 2 steps forward and swiftly turned her head around as her expression was extremely grave as she looked behind her. His gaze swept past Zhu Wuxian, and then he quickly looked at the surroundings. The expression on his face became more and more solemn. Zhu Wuxin, did you sense a very strange aura just now? She asked. Zhu Wuxin's eyes flickered. His thick eyelashes hid all the emotions in his eyes, leaving only an icy chill. No. No. Impossible. That fleeting sense of danger just now was definitely not an illusion. Zhu Wuxin would never let her feel such a sense of danger and unease in front of her. Therefore, there must be someone hiding in the dark. In the dark? Could it be? Yiqing Luo suddenly recalled that in the afternoon, Huangfu Trio had followed Huangfu Zhentian to the treasures exchange. When Huangfu Fengyan left, she looked at her with a gaze. Her heart skipped a beat. Not good. Ah Sheng and Zishi. Something must have happened at the treasures exchange hall. Yiqing Luo. Zhu Wuxian stood in front of Yiqing Luo, his expressionless face was indifferent. Move aside. Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand to push Zhu Wuxian aside. But Zhu Wuxin grabbed her wrist with the back of his hand. Yiqing Luo struggled but he didn't loosen his grip. His calm and indifferent face brought along an oppressive aura. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased tightly. Since she couldn't struggle free, she might as well not move. She only raised her head as her charming eyes were coated with ice, looking at Zhu Wuxian's eyes without blinking. Your appearance, is it a coincidence or? Zhu Wuxian's ability was above hers. Chapter 3893. But now, Zhu Wuxian intentionally stopped her here. This made Yiqing Luo think more. Zhu Wuxian's deep and icy cold eyes looked deeply at her suspicious gaze as his thin lips slowly rose, as though it was curled into an extremely shallow arc. That arc was very shallow, very shallow. So shallow that Yiqing Luo could only feel his self-deprecation. In your heart, am I such a person? Zhu Wuxian's voice was also very faint, with a tinge of ridicule. The hand which he held her wrist tightened. Yiqing Luo took a small step back. Facing such a piercing, questioning, and hurt gaze, she really doubted herself. Did she make a mistake? After all, Zhu Wuxian indeed didn't seem like someone who would cooperate with others to complete some plans. It was just as he had said before. He would never do anything to hurt her. But there was a strange feeling in her heart, reminding her of something. That fleeting sense of danger just now was gone. And Zhu Wuxian's unresponsive attitude. It really made her have no choice but to think more. She exchanged glances with Zhu Wuxian for a moment. She kept away the suspicion and probing in her eyes as she shook her wrist which was being held. All right, I believe you. But you must let go of me now. My friend might be in danger. Not letting go. Zhu Wuxian leaned even closer. The plum fragrance from his body enveloped her. Yiqing Luo wasn't used to it and wanted to retreat, but Zhu Wuxian held her even tighter as he pulled her towards his direction. Every time you ask me to let go, Yiqing Luo, is your heart made of iron? Yiqing Luo immediately raised her hand and blocked his chest. She raised her head as her brows creased even tighter. Zhu Wuxian, if you continue to pester me endlessly, don't force me to really suspect you. Heh. He laughed lightly as his indifferent expression didn't fluctuate at all. His lips curled into a self-deprecating smile, as though he was ridiculing himself for being so ridiculous. Haven't you suspected me enough? Zhu Wuxian's clear voice was calm, but Yiqing Luo could tell that he was condemning her. Yiqing Luo felt that today's Zhu Wuxian was extremely strange. Following her for no reason. Then, he stopped her for no reason. She didn't want to suspect Zhu Wuxian. However, Zhu Wuxian's current actions made her doubt him. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened as a layer of frost appeared between her brows. In that case, your current motive is to not let me rush over to the treasure-gathering exchange? Zhu Wuxin's brows twitched slightly. Finally, he released Yiqing Luo's wrist. Yiqing Luo didn't even bother to take a look at him as she speedily flew towards the direction of the treasure-gathering exchange. Just as he moved, something tightened around his waist. Zhu Wuxin's wrist circled around her waist. Yiqing Luo's expression sunk. What exactly do you want to do? I'll go with you in case you run away. Zhu Wuxin narrowed his cold eyes. His clear voice was frighteningly deep, giving off a strange feeling of danger. Yiqing Luo's fingers touched his hand, which was wrapped around her waist, and with a nimble movement, she distanced herself from his approach. We can do it together, but don't get touchy. Except for Dmo Xian. If any other man approached her, she would feel repulsed. Not to mention, clasping her wrists and hugging her waist. Yiqing Luo's feet stirred up the wind as her speed was extremely fast. Zhu Wuxian was behind her, gazing deeply at her back view. In his black pupils, there seemed to be a whirlpool surging. This feeling was like every single time she would turn around and leave without any hesitation. She had never turned around to give him a look. In her eyes, he would never exist. He could only look at her back view forever. Chapter 3894. Zhu Wuxian's 5 fingers tightened. In his mind, the bewitching words of that person from secluded palace kept appearing. Young Patriarch Chu, do you really think that by silently putting in the effort behind the scenes, you will be able to get the beauty back? I'll tell you directly, this way we'll never get Yiqing Luo's heart. Why do you think Yiqing Luo is so dead set on the Overlord even after she had agreed to marry you? It's because the Overlord knows how to make use of his advantage, to make Yiqing Luo slowly fall into his emotional trap. Young Patriarch Chu, you're too silly. Silly? He also felt that he was rather silly. Obviously, based on his character. If he wanted, he would plunder. If he couldn't get it, he would destroy it. But unfortunately, when facing Yiqing Luo, countless of times, his mind had already devised 100 ways to plunder Yiqing Luo. But every time he met Yiqing Luo's gaze, all of his thoughts turned into a blank. Couldn't bear to see any trace of loathing towards him in her eyes. Couldn't bear to see any trace of disappointment towards him in her eyes. Couldn't bear to let her treat him as a stranger in future. Couldn't bear to even plunder. How could he bear to destroy it? Zhu Wuxian felt that he was becoming more and more unlike himself. Treasures Exchange Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasures Exchange Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasure Gathering Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasures Exchange Hall. Almost subconsciously, the teacup in his hand had already been thrown towards a dark corner. Almost subconsciously, the teacup in his hand had already been thrown into the darkness. Gu Zishi fell into his arms as her face blushed slightly. Gu Zishi fell into his arms, her pretty face blushing. She also felt the cold murderous air in the room. She also sensed the chilling aura that permeated the room. Just as that teacup hit the dark corner. When the teacup hit the dark corner, it was already too late. A few figures speedily dashed out. Following that, a few assassins dressed in black jumped in from all directions. Then, a few assassins dressed in black jumped in from all directions, holding weapons in their hands that emitted a chilling light. Pei Sheng tightened his grip on Gu Zixi delicate body as he surveyed his surroundings. He then raised his eyebrows in alarm. There were at least 20 people in front of him. Each of them was tall and sturdy. Furthermore, the pressure from the Xian energy flowing through his body made it hard for him to breathe. Who are you? Why are you causing trouble at treasure gathering? This was Pei Sheng's first time encountering an assassin. His handsome face was filled with vigilance. Do it. Why would the assassin waste so much time talking to Pei Sheng? With a wave of his arm, he directed the other assassins to attack Pei Sheng. Zixi, hold on tight. Pei Sheng's face darkened, and the dark golden light in his eyes flickered even more wantonly. Immediately after, a strong burst of dark force erupted from his body. A dark golden light swirled around Pei Sheng's body. Using his hand as a blade, he slashed out a few dark golden saber lights at the assassins who were coming at him from all directions. The dark rays slashed down, and the air seemed to have been cut open. The raging hurricane was like a wave, setting off huge waves. Sheng, don't bother about me. Gu Zixi looked at the surrounding murderous assassins, as a layer of cold glint surfaced in her eyes. 20 powerful assassins whose profound grades were not low, to let Pei Sheng deal with them alone, and he still had to protect her. This was absolutely taxing. Chapter 3895. Gu Zixi's gaze swept across the assassins. His mind was already quickly analyzing the strength of these people and the time it would take for the two of them to react. Pei Sheng did not let go. Gu Zixi knew he was worried about her. She held Pei Sheng's hand around her waist and smiled at him. Trust me, I won't let myself get hurt. The dark light intertwined. Pei Sheng saw the determination in Gu Zixi's eyes. He hesitated for a moment before letting go of her. Be careful. Gu Zixi smiled and nodded. Then, a spear appeared out of nowhere and attacked the surrounding assassins. The two of them attacked together. It did reduce the pressure on Pei Sheng. But for the two of them, the situation was not optimistic. There were too many assassins. And they were not weak. No matter how strong they were, they could not fight against so many. The two of them were at a disadvantage. Especially in terms of their physical strength, they could not compare to specially trained assassins. They resisted. After a while, they could not escape from the blades of these assassins. They could not go on like this. Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi were forced to retreat again and again. They fled into the backyard of Treasure Gathering Hall. There was no way out. At the same time, the surrounding assassins were closing in. Their attacks were very vicious. Their goal was clear. It was to take both of their lives. Killing moves were unleashed, the entire treasure exchange hall shook with thunderous aftershocks. But with such a huge commotion, it did not attract the attention of the citizens. It was as if the treasure exchange had been isolated from without embroiling city. After forcing back a wave of attacks, the two of them were exhausted. Gu Zixi looked up at the dark, starless sky above the courtyard. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes flashed. She got close to Pei Sheng and stuffed something into his hands. I will attract their attention. You find a chance to throw this out of the courtyard. It was a round tube the length of a finger, carved out of bamboo. Pei Sheng didn't know what it was when he held it in his hand. After instructing Pei Sheng, Gu Zixi raised her spear. The spear had swept up a wave, and the explosive energy rushed towards the assassins. It was so fast that Pei Sheng did not have time to swap places with Gu Zixi. He saw that Gu Zixi was already fighting with the assassin. If he delayed any longer, it would only put Zixi in more danger. Pei Sheng gripped the tube tightly, leaped up, and threw the item outside the courtyard. He didn't know if it was an illusion. when the tube flew out of the courtyard. He could vaguely see a transparent wave of light blocking the tube. However, immediately after, a wisp of dark golden flowing light flickered within the transparent light wave. In the blink of an eye, the tube rushed out of the wall and landed outside the courtyard. Boom! There was a deafening explosion. A wisp of green smoke surged into the sky. The green smoke quickly filled the sky and formed a complicated pattern. Pei Sheng didn't have much time to pay attention to this strange scene. After making sure that the tube was thrown out of the hospital, some of the assassins had already sensed that something was wrong and quickly pounced towards him, wanting to stop him. Ugh! There was a muffled grunt. Gu Zixi figure stood in front of him. The spear flipped, repelling the countless killer moves in front of it. However, the remnant might was still vibrating. Gu Zixi was hit in the chest. Zixi. Pei Sheng's pupils constricted. He quickly rushed forward and held Gu Zixi's delicate body. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of Gu Zixi's mouth. Chapter 3896. I'm fine. Gu Zixi raised her hand and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips. She shook her head at Pei Sheng and said, "Don't get distracted. Hold on a little longer. Our reinforcements will be here soon." The woman's face was clearly pale, but the corners of her mouth curved into a faint smile, pretending to be relaxed as she comforted him. Pei Sheng had an indescribable feeling in his heart. When the surrounding assassins saw this, they took the opportunity to rush forward. A murderous aura spread across the sky. However, the man who was holding the woman in his arms was stiff and motionless. It was as if he did not notice the presence of the assassins. The assassin was closing in on him at high speed. Gu Zixi's pupils dilated as she struggled to stand in front of Pei Sheng. Ah! All of a sudden, Song Pei Sheng let out a roar. The man hugged the woman and suddenly raised his head. His handsome face looked somewhat ferocious because of the roar. His eyes were covered in a layer of dark golden light. Such a radiance was extremely dazzling. It was as if all the light had gathered in his eyes. Pei Sheng roared. The surrounding assassins who were swarming over were all sent flying by the intense flowing light that burst forth from Pei Sheng's body. When Yiqing Luo just rushed over, this was what she saw. She frowned slightly and looked at the man in front of her who was surrounded by flowing lights. The Huangfu bloodline in Pei Sheng's body was activated once again. This was not a good sign. This kind of frequent activation of the Huangfu bloodline was a little like her using a divine artifact or some other power to temporarily increase her strength. It was very easy for it to exceed the limits of her body. Suddenly, she sensed something, and her ears twitched. A group of forces is approaching. Yiqing Luo's expression congealed slightly as she glanced sideways at Zhu Wuxian's direction. Chu Wuxin nodded expressionlessly. She raised her head and looked at the spreading smoke in the sky. This approaching force. Was Gu Zixi using this signal flare to call for reinforcements, or were they from the killer's side? At this moment, Pei Sheng had already stopped shouting. He slightly tightened his arms around Gu Zixi and lowered his eyes. Because of Pei Sheng's roar and the aura bursting forth from his body, Gu Zixi was dumbfounded. Pei Sheng lowered his head. Her eyelashes fluttered, and when she met Pei Sheng's gaze, she froze. Pei Sheng's eyes were dark gold. It was different from the dark golden flowing light that flashed from time to time. The current him. His eyes were dark gold in color. It was a noble and majestic color. "Are you scared?" Pei Sheng gently bent down, kissed her forehead, and asked softly. Gu Zixi blinked her eyes and shook her head violently. No, don't be afraid. I won't let those people hurt you again." Pei Sheng's voice was still gentle. However, the expression on his face and his dark golden eyes were filled with a chilling killing intent. He wondered if it was because of the color of her eyes. Gu Zishi felt that Pei Sheng's aura was so strong that he was 8 meters tall. Pei Sheng gently pushed Gu Zishi behind his back. His figure was tall and straight. He looked at the assassins who had been sent flying, and his dark golden eyes flashed with an extremely cold killing intent. The assassins looked at each other for a moment. Then, they pounced on Pei Sheng. On the outer wall of the courtyard, 2 blazing figures were extremely eye-catching. The wind blew and Zhu Wuxian's clothes fluttered. His eyes were calm as he looked at Yiqing Luo. Aren't you in a hurry to save him? Why aren't you making a move? Chapter 3897. The current Pei Sheng shouldn't have any problem dealing with those killers. She made her move. She might as well let Pei Sheng nurture some experience. Let him deal with it himself. She was just going to watch the show and wait for the team that was rushing over. Which side were they from? It was indeed as what Yiqing Luo said. The assassins who originally had the upper hand were besieging Pei Sheng, but they were actually unable to suppress Pei Sheng's arrogance. On the contrary, it made Pei Sheng braver as he fought. But it was after all 1 against 20. Under the entanglement, Pei Sheng's body was covered with scattered wounds. His robe was dyed red with blood. This made Pei Sheng even more bloodthirsty. The profound rays in his hands became sharper and sharper. Wave after wave of Xian waves exploded. The sounds of fighting were extremely loud. The originally narrow and simple backyard had turned into ruins under the entanglement. Sheng. Gu Zishi's voice was trembling as she stared at Pei Sheng with reddened eyes. Looking at the increasing number of wounds on Pei Sheng's body, she gripped her long spear tightly as she wanted to go forward to help. But she was worried that her rash actions would implicate Pei Sheng. Now Pei Sheng alone was suppressing 20 of them. If this rhythm was disrupted, Pei Sheng would be overwhelmed. She was extremely anxious as she stared anxiously at the sky outside the courtyard, which was filled with green smoke. She turned her head. She saw 2 figures standing on top of the wall. It was Yiqing Luo. On seeing Yiqing Luo, Gu Zishi's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to open her mouth, she saw the young lady's bright eyes curling into a smile as she shook her head. Gu Zishi was stunned as she didn't understand what was going on. Yiqing Luo was obviously just by the side. Why didn't she help Pei Sheng? But she was very clear in her heart. Yiqing Luo absolutely wouldn't ignore Pei Sheng. Yiqing Luo definitely had her reasons for making such a decision. No matter how anxious Gu Zishi was, she forcefully suppressed it down. Knowing that Yiqing Luo was just by the side, she wasn't worried anymore. She's asking you for help. Chu Wuxian naturally noticed Gu Zishi's gaze as his lips twitched coldly. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her eyes flashed. Why do I feel that you seem to be more anxious than me? Zhu Wuxian sneered softly and said in a self-mocking manner, just now, in order to rush over to save these 2 people, you spoke coldly to me. Now that I've accompanied you here, you're watching the show. Do you think I can feel at ease? Your heart will also have times where it's not balanced. Yiqing Luo slowly leaned in close to Zhu Wuxian, as her gaze looked straight at the direction of his heart. Zhu Wuxian's expression was cold, and his gaze was somewhat indifferent. I only have feelings for you, but you will only treat me as if I have no feelings for you. Yiqing Luo opened her eyes. His gaze returned to the battlefield below. The words that came out of his mouth were directed at Zhu Wuxin. My answer is the same as before. Chu Wuxin, it's time for you to walk out of the past. You, who are always limited by the past, will never be able to let others see your heart. I only want you to see it. Zhu Wuxin's words of love came one after another. Yiqing Luo felt that every time she met Zhu Wuxian, Zhu Wuxin's cheesy words of love were upgraded. Every single time, it was even more seductive than the previous time. This didn't fit his image of an iceberg brother. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath. Towards Zhu Wuxian, who was extremely obsessed, he wouldn't listen to any of her rejections. Facing Zhu Wuxian, she felt a sense of helplessness. Just at this moment, Yiqing Luo's peripheral vision caught something. He's here. Chapter 3898. When Yiqing Luo landed on the ground. Coincidentally, he stood in front of the group of people who were rushing over. There were about 30 people. They were all dressed in dark green clothes. The blood-stained flower pattern embroidered on it revealed their identities. Bloody mercenary group. The leader of the group was the most eye-catching existence. She was wearing a dark-colored dress with elegant pendants. He didn't seem like a leader at all. When Su Qingbing saw that the person blocking in front of her was Yiqing Luo, the grave and anxious expression on her face faded a little. "Miss Yi, have you seen Zishi?" Yiqing Luo nodded as she raised her hand and pointed towards the fading green smoke. "This is your blood mercenary group's signal flare?" "Yes." Su Qingbing nodded. However, his eyes were looking around quickly. Finally, his gaze fell on the entrance of the Gathering Treasures Exchange. "Captain, I can feel the fluctuation of Xian Qi coming from inside. Zishi should be inside." Deputy Regiment Commander Bo's face was filled with anxiety. When he looked at Zhu Bao, he shot forward like a cannonball. Su Qingbing didn't stop him. The signal flare was shot by Gu Zishi. If it wasn't an emergency, Gu Zishi would never use this signal flare. "Zishi is fine." Yiqing Luo pointed to the other side of the wall. "If you're worried, you can go up and take a look." Su Qingbing furrowed her brows as a complicated expression appeared on her face. However, when they saw a red figure standing on the wall, a man emitting an extremely cold aura, their eyes unconsciously widened. Chu, Su Qingbing's expression changed unpredictably when she saw the man's face. And that person's vision had always been on Yiqing Luo. His face was cold. However, the emotions in his eyes were gentle. It was only when he sensed Su Qingbing's gaze that he raised his eyes slightly. When he looked at her, it was as if his eyes were covered with a layer of frost. When Yiqing Luo heard Su Qingbing's unfinished words, she couldn't help but raised her slender brows. Chu? Su Qingbing actually knew Zhu Wuxin. Furthermore, just now, Zhu Wuxin's gaze had paused on Su Qingbing for more than 3 seconds. In other words, Zhu Wuxin also knew Su Qingbing? But there was no time for Yiqing Luo to ponder over it. Bo Songyi's explosive roar could be heard from the side of the Treasures Exchange Hall. "Zishi. Are you hurt?" This roar. Su Qingbing was startled awake. It also interrupted Yiqing Luo's deep thoughts. Su Qingbing quickly walked towards the treasure gathering exchange. He had just arrived at the door. She stopped in her tracks and frowned. Then, he raised his hand and touched the air with his fingers. In the blink of an eye, Yiqing Luo saw that the direction of Su Qingbing's finger seemed to have sliced open a thin seam in the air. The transparent qi wave slowly split open to both sides, revealing a huge hole. A cold light flashed in Su Qingbing's eyes, and her slender fingers suddenly clenched tightly. That layer of air wave instantly shattered into pieces and collapsed. Within the Treasures Gathering Exchange Hall, violent and tyrannical profound energy spread out in all directions. When the 30 mercenaries from Bloody Mercenary Group who had rushed over felt this profound energy, their faces darkened and they looked at Su Qingbing with a serious expression. Su Qingbing nodded. A group of people swarmed into the Treasures Exchange Hall. Looking at the group of aggressive mercenaries, Duan Ling Tian nodded. Yiqing Luo slanted her head, as she couldn't be bothered to stop them. Inside, Pei Sheng should have already reached his limit. Chapter 3899. With the addition of the Blood Mercenaries group's mercenaries, how would those killers have any ability to resist? Especially. This was the first time Gu Zixi had used the signal flare. Under Su Qingbing's anxiety, she brought along the Blood Mercenaries group's elite mercenaries. With this move, those killers could only wait to be captured. Yiqing Luo and Su Qingbing walked to the backyard. Bo Songyi was supporting Gu Zixi as they walked over. Group leader, Zixi is injured. Gu Zixi smiled at Su Qingbing. Group leader, I'm fine, it's just a small injury. Su Qingbing looked at Gu Zixi pale face and frowned slightly. What's going on? Why are there killers here? She raised her eyes and glanced at Bo Songyi. Have you checked clearly? Who are these killers here to kill? Mentioning this, Bo Songyi's expression sunk. He glanced at Pei Sheng's direction from the corner of his eyes and gave a cold harumph. The trouble that lad created has caused Zixi to suffer. I'm really fine, it has nothing to do with Sheng. Gu Zixi heard Bo Songyi's tone and immediately opened her mouth to explain. Bo Songyi couldn't help but sneer. He can't even protect you, what kind of man is he? Gu Zixi bit her lower lip as a sliver of anger surfaced on her face. Bo Songyi. You. Before she could finish her words, Su Qingbing interrupted. Sheng? Not calling me brother anymore? Su Qingbing opened her mouth. She indeed suppressed Gu Zixi's accusation. Gu Zixi's face blushed slightly as she slowly lowered her eyelids, looking a little shy. Not brother anymore. TSK. Su Qingbing's lips curled as her elegant face broke out into a smile. Then congratulations, the clouds have parted to see the moon. Gu Zixi's face turned even redder. The two of them spoke one after another. Bo Songyi was completely stunned by the amount of information that was revealed. He looked at Gu Zixi in astonishment as his voice trembled. You and that lad. Emin, Gu Zixi smiled as she nodded. The glow in Bo Songyi's eyes dimmed. But he pretended not to mind as he said, congratulations. Coincidentally, Pei Sheng, with the help of the mercenaries, had restrained all the killers and was anxiously looking for Gu Zixi. When he saw Gu Zixi, he quickly walked over. He stretched out his long arm and pulled Gu Zixi away from Bo Songyi's side into his embrace. He placed his large palm on Gu Zixi's face and gently caressed it. Are you all right? He asked gently. Gu Zixi leaned against his chest, and her pretty face was slightly flushed. I'm fine. When their eyes met, Yi Shiwen's expression changed. It was as if there was no room for anyone else. Bo Songyi looked at his empty wrist, then raised his head and looked at Gu Zixi, who was obviously happy and sweet. His hand, which was suspended in mid-air, clenched into a fist. Su Qingbing walked over and gently patted his shoulder. Then, he walked past Bo Songyi and walked into the courtyard. This melodramatic relationship drama made Yiqing Luo smacked her lips non-stop. However, she did not intend to intervene in this melodramatic scene. She glanced at the two of them, and after confirming that they only had some superficial injuries, she followed Su Qingbing into the courtyard. When he passed by Pei Sheng, she took out a medicine bottle and stuffed it into his hand. In the courtyard, the mercenaries stood by the side. The killers knelt on the ground, and one by one, their masks were torn off, revealing their faces. The killers had apparently been injected with profound qi, and were rooted to the ground, unable to even commit suicide. The mercenaries stood neatly by the side. The killers were pressed onto the ground in a sorry state. This stark contrast. TSK, let the Blood Red's elite mercenaries come over to wrap things up. Chapter 3900. Yiqing Luo and Su Qingbing walked over. The killer's eyes widened as they stared at the both of them with hatred. As though they were conveying their thoughts, don't try to dig out any information from us. I will not say anything even if I die. Kill me if you have the guts. Were killers afraid of death? No. They had to commit suicide if they failed the mission. They had the determination to die when they went out on a mission. What was there to be afraid of? So, other than the few killers who were killed by Pei Sheng, the remaining 10 overkillers all had a "I am not afraid of anything" expression. Yi Qing Luo swept past the killers' faces and asked Su Qingbing sideways, "These killers, which killer force are they from? You may not believe it if I say it." Su Qingbing shot a glance at the killers as her lips curled into a ridiculing arc. From their attire, these killers should be from Heaven Realm, Killer Alliance. Heaven Realm? Yi Qing Luo's lips twitched. She really couldn't believe it if she said it out. This bunch of weak scum killers. Before Pei Sheng's transformation, he was already able to fight against 20 of them. Although they were at a disadvantage, but they weren't able to kill Pei Sheng. Especially the moment the mercenaries came over. They didn't even have the chance to resist and were directly pressed onto the ground. Wasn't this too useless? Killers from Heaven Realm? So weak? Surely it wasn't a joke. No. Seeing the meaning of Yi Qing Luo's expression, Su Qingbing directly responded, "Because I brought the elites from Blood Red." Her words paused slightly, as though she was afraid that Yi Qing Luo didn't understand. She explained, "These elites' abilities are well known in Heaven Realm." Yi Qing Luo sucked in a breath of cold air. "They are in the Earth Realm, doesn't that violate the balance of the realm? Won't the balance historian interfere? Generally speaking, when one's ability reached a certain level. After accepting the assessment, they would be forced to ascend to the next realm." Su Qingbing gave her a "you are a country bumpkin" look. As long as you don't do anything that violates the balance of the realm, the historian can't do anything. Alright. If that was the explanation, then these Heaven Realm killers wouldn't be that weak. But Yi Qing Luo felt that they were still quite weak. The Assassin Alliance was the largest assassin organization in Heaven Realm. With a high status, the price would naturally be high. The customers who accepted orders were either rich or powerful. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes. He already had a candidate in mind. "Do you know who the mastermind is?" Su Qingbing raised her eyebrows. "If you know, then kill these people." Yi Qing Luo went into a blank, as her charming eyes lifted up slightly, meeting Su Qingbing's eyes. This woman seemed to be very observant. What she wants. Su Qingbing could guess it very quickly. Su Qingbing, on the other hand, was calm. After their eyes met, she even smiled at her. Yi Qing Luo hid the probing look in her eyes and replied with a smile, "The killer from the Heaven Realm, the target is Pei Sheng, except Pei Sheng." Yi Qing Luo hadn't even finished her words. Suddenly, an anxious voice descended from the sky. Then, a figure rushed into the courtyard. The man scanned his surroundings. After locking onto his target, his figure flashed and he dashed over. Pei Sheng was applying medicine on Gu Zixi wound. Suddenly, his shoulder was grabbed by an enormous force. His body was turned to the other side. She saw an old, wrinkled face, and a pair of concerned and worried eyes. Old master." Pei Sheng was so shocked that he stuttered, "You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."